君の虜になってしまえばきっとこの夏は充実するのもっともう戻れなくたって忘れないでも気持ちが伝えてしまえばいつかこの夢は覚めてしまうだろうな青い影が揺れるマジカット君の虜になってしまえばきっとこの夏は充実するのもっともう戻れなくたって忘れないでも気持ちが伝えてしまえばいつかこの夢は覚めてしまうだろうな青い影が揺れるマジカット君の虜になってしまえばきっとこの夏は充実するのもっともう戻れなくたって忘れないでも気持ちが伝えてしまえばいつかこの夢は覚めてしまうだろうな青い影が揺れるマジカット何年経っても言えない後悔したって今はないでも言葉はここまで出てるのSummertime 海岸通りを歩きたいドライブだってしてみたい足し
All right, hello everybody. Hello, hello.
Hi.
Well,
We're live. Yeah.
Mm.
I decided I was not going to change my Fugi over from what I had it on my stream. So you're just going to have to deal with the cute chibi xenomorph. Yeah.
Kawaii desu ne.
very kawaii desu ne.
that was unexpected.
You Why are you this way? Why? Moon?
Hmm?
Why are you this way?
I'm afraid I don't have an answer for you.
I don't think
I
anybody
guess the
really
better
has an
question
answer
would
for
be
that.
why not? That would be his retort question.
No, I don't need his retort. I don't need his retort. I wanted a serious answer, but I guess
You're never going to get a serious answer from me.
yeah. I was gonna say I guess that's pretty much impossible at this point. So yeah, that's we're on volume 13, chapter 4 at this point. So we are now officially past the anime.
Damn it, I just thought of the best response I should have said for that. Why are you the way you are? Tylenol.
You mean acetaminophen?
Do you not know about the whole Tylenol causes autism bullshit?
Yes. Do you not know that I was literally quoting the word that Donald Trump could not say? Acetaminophen.
Yep.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's literally one of the easiest ones to say.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anyway, that being the case,
Yep,
yeah, we're
Ay,
picking
ay, ay.
up we're picking up post anime here.
yep.
It's family time. Got all the family together, including
We're officially
The
ahead of
little
the
one.
anime until the actual anime comes out, and then we won't be anymore.
No,
No,
dude,
we'll
No,
still be
we'll
ahead of
still
the
be
anime.
ahead of the anime. Pretty sure we will be.
By
I
the
think the
time
anime is
season
not coming
4
out.
comes out, yeah.
No, it's season 3.
Yeah,
Dude,
season
whatever.
4.
Yeah, season 3. Dude, if we were at season 4, holy crap.
Oh,
But no,
then,
season
yeah, then I
3
wouldn't say anything.
Season 3, I don't think comes out until like spring or summer. So we've got
Yeah, let me
A
go check that
while.
now.
We got a while.
we've got a while, yeah. So, because it hasn't been announced that it's coming out
April.
this winter. Yeah, April. That's spring. That's the spring anime lineup. So yeah,
Alrighty.
we've got
Yeah,
we've,
we'll probably.
we've got 5 months. I think we'll probably get at least halfway through before the anime starts, and then we can judge the anime based on what we know.
Hmm.
All right. No, guys. Yeah, we're ahead of the anime. We're gonna get. There's a lot of good info to go over. Pardon me. Good times to be had by all. That being said, it's Moon's turn to read tonight.
Woo!
I'm assuming Cube didn't want to show up and like grace us with his voice,
maybe
Or he
not yet.
forgot.
or he
Maybe.
forgot. Either or. I
He was
thought
on
he
a message.
Or he's
commented
busy.
earlier.
He was pretty active with it last week. He even showed up on my stream like the day after, and I think he showed up at a couple things, like Fat Dog stuff after that. But then I don't know. He's like,
Could be
I'm
doing
good for
something.
the week.
We don't know.
Yeah, he might be busy too. We don't know.
Okay.
Right.
I just saw him talking earlier, and I was like, "Oh, what's going on?" But yeah, all right. We'll holler at him. We'll holler at him.
Yo, where you at? And then it's just he's
The
like,
dulcet tones.
"Scooping
Of
me."
Cube. The dulcet tones of Cube.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah.
Right.
Here he is.
Maybe.
There we go.
Huh?
There is a cube.
A cube.
Behold the infinite
Very
cube.
kawaii desu.
Yeah.
God,
You understand.
Thank you.
You understand the
God
message.
damn
Just
it.
in his voice, give me milk.
Kawaii desu ne.
No. This is not okay. You guys are horrible.
No, it's not okay. It is kawaii.
No, it is not okay. Things are not very Daijobu.
No, I'd say so.
This
You're
sparks
the one who's making
joy.
it weird.
It does not. Pain Dio. Pain Dio. Alright. Anyway. Alright, so we have all the idiots together. Yay. That being
And there was
said-
much rejoicing.
Yippee.
Yeah.
Huzzah.
I am so excited
Haru.
for the new map that's supposed to be dropping between 5 a.m. and 9 a.m. tomorrow.
For
Phasmophobia.
I thought so. I didn't want to be sure.
Yeah, the thing that's gonna make me cry the most is looking at the prices. Okay, it's not your laughter, but okay. Thing that's gonna make me cry the most is looking at the prices for like all the food at the diner and seeing how cheap it is and being like, "Yep, what Europeans think America."
That was
costs.
a time.
Yeah.
If only.
If only. No, honestly, it looks like this takes place in the 90s because of the type of cop car that's sitting outside. I'm just like, dude.
It could.
Ooh,
It very well
attention
could.
to detail.
They're like, it's $1.50
What does
for a
that mean
slice
for
of
the
pie. And I'm
lore?
like, dude, I can't even get.
I
fucking-
wish.
I can't even get candy from the old quarter machine for $1.50 anymore. Are you kidding?
Honestly, as big as the tier 3 cameras are, I would put it somewhere in the early 2000s,
Mmm.
which would still make sense for those prices and even the police car.
Mmm.
I mean, there's nothing to say they couldn't still use those cameras. They
late
might just be
90s,
that
early
good of a camera.
2000s. Yeah, before 05 easily. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the quality back
The
then
first half
probably
of the
would've
Bush
lasted through
administration.
the early 2000s too.
Mm.
'Cause they were
But
just
yeah.
built different.
Moon is reading today. I don't have any Fat Dog updates. We're working on stuff behind the scenes, and I don't want to say anything until I
We're
have more
doing
concrete
stuff.
Secrets.
We're all working on things.
Yeah.
Don't worry,
Um,
we'll be back with it next week, baby. For
I'm
updates.
still waiting. I'm still waiting on all of the audio to get cleaned up for Overlord. There's a lot, guys. There's just a lot. But
A
once it
lot of people
does-
speak.
Once it does, once it's all cleaned up, I'm putting it. I'm doing one more run through of all of the scenes and putting the dialogue together where it belongs, and then rendering it all out, and we will have the completed version good to go because we have all the video has been
Yay.
done. Now we're just waiting on the audio. All right,
Okay.
there we go. All right, that's everything.
Chapter 4. Can I keep him?
Oh my fucking god! The hell is
Burger
going
King
on
foot
today?
lettuce.
No.
Okay.
Bye.
I don't know why that
Ah,
reminded me of
shit.
like the Dragon Ball Z, like, "Are you a Yoshi?" kind of like inflection, and it's like, "Can I ride you?" Yes, Moon. I'm a blue fucking dinosaur.
Open. There you go. I have been brought cake, and I cannot touch it until I finish fucking reading. So, there it shall sit upon my desk. Anyways,
You swallow it.
I wish I could eat it that fast, but I really want to savor it. So,
Yeah.
give me a minute.
Okay.
Let's talk about Aisha for a moment. The girl was doing well. Despite the tragedies that had befallen our family, she seemed as bright and energetic as ever. I never caught her gazing sadly out the windows like her mother sometimes did. She didn't bite her lip when she looked at Paul's sword, the way Norn would. She did her housework cheerfully as if nothing had changed. During the day, she tended her flowers in the garden, and in her room, at night, she threw herself into my magic lessons and cuddled up with me happily. It almost seemed like she was more energetic than before. She was probably the single least melancholy person in our entire house. Sometimes it almost felt like she wasn't mourning Paul at all. I couldn't help wondering if he hadn't meant that much to her. That said, Norn didn't remember much from our time at Buena Village, so it seemed possible that Aisha didn't have many memories of Paul or Zenith either. Just as Norn had spent many years on the road with Paul, Aisha had spent most of her childhood with Lilia. All things considered, it wasn't fair for me to expect her to act all gloomy. Maybe her joy at Lilia's safe return overweighed her sadness at Paul's death. If so, it was probably for the best. It wasn't like I wanted my sister moping around instead of enjoying life after all. One day I had nothing in particular to do. My classes weren't meeting that day, but unfortunately Roxy and Sylphie both had to work. I was planning to look after Lucy and spend the day relaxing. I felt a little guilty about lazing around the place while both my wives were hard at work. But grown-ups need to get their rest in when they can, right? I'm not earning any money at the moment, though. Is that really okay? Considering I've got a baby and all. Well, getting my education is the best way to earn more money later, right? Yeah, it's all good. After seeing off my wives, I checked in on Lucy. She was still sound asleep, so I wandered out into the garden for no particular reason. When we first moved in here, there was nothing out here but a barren, neglected patch of earth. But now, after only a few years, it had been transformed completely. First of all, we now had 3 big evergreen trees back there. One of them flowered in spring, the second in summer, and the third in autumn. Not that I'd seen them blooming for myself. When I'd asked Aisha where she got them, she explained that she'd placed a request with the Adventurers Guild and had them brought here from the nearest forest. Transporting full-grown trees sounded like a real hassle, so I asked her how much it had cost. She said Zenoba had helped out, so she only had to cover the cost of a few bodyguards. Oh, that makes sense. In one corner of the garden, there was a section of soil separated from the rest by brick dividers. This was where Aisha had planted the rice seeds. I had brought back with me. None of us knew how to make a proper rice paddy, so we were trying to grow the rice on dry soil. So far, the first crops seemed to be sprouting nicely. It was hard to say whether we'd get anything edible out of it in the end, though. Aisha was squatting down by that small field at the moment. To my surprise, Zenith was sitting next to her. "What are you two doing?" I called.
"Oh, hi, Rudius," said Aisha, looking back at me. "We're weeding the rice."
For a second, I thought she was joking, but then I walked over and realized it was true. Aisha was pulling weeds out from between the stalks of rice, and Zenith was quietly helping out as well. Now that I thought about it, I had some vague memories of Zenith pulling weeds back in Buena Village. Maybe it was just a standard part of growing plants, even in a cold climate like this. Miss Zenith,
Miss Zenith, Miss Zenith wanted to help out too.
Something about about the Miss Zenith thing didn't sit quite right with me. Aisha, you can call Mother Zenith Mom if you want, you know?
Nah, Mother Lilia said I can't. She always says I have to call her Miss Zenith or Madam.
Ah, so it was another one of Lilia's commandments. She was sure strict about this stuff. Then again, I felt like Aisha didn't really think of Zenith as a mother anyway. For the record, Zenith had treated her just like one of her own children back when she was a baby, but Aisha obviously couldn't remember that. Well, whatever. It wasn't that big a deal either way.
How long has Mother Zenith been helping you out like this? For a while now, actually. Mother Lilia tried to stop her at first, but she always comes over to help when I start messing around in the garden. She's better at it than I am.
Zenith had put a lot of effort into maintaining our garden back in Buena Village, too. Maybe that had something to do with this. I wasn't going to discourage it either way. You never knew what might help her regain her memories. In any case, it was kind of nice seeing her and Aisha sitting side by side like this. They looked content in each other's company. Even if they weren't blood related, I guess Zenith was still Aisha's mother.
Oh, right, Rudius, you're off today, right?
As I watched them working, Aisha turned back to look at me. Her cheek was smudged with mud.
Yeah, I'll be home all day. Great! There's something I want to show you. Can you come by my room later?
Sure thing, I said, bending down to wipe her face. Aisha smiled dopely as I cleaned her off. Zenith looked on from beside her, staring at us both intently.
There's something I want to show you. Can you come by my room later?
A very suggestive line, I'm sure you'll agree. Aisha was a very precocious kid. There was a possibility she'd lift up her skirt and try to show me her private parts or something. Well, maybe not, on second thought. We already took baths together on a regular basis. She didn't have anything under there I wasn't already familiar with. Still, the kid was so shameless that I was starting to get a little worried about her future. Maybe I should be giving her some basic sex ed lessons at this point? Wait, didn't she say Lily had gone over all that with her? Okay, but what if she taught her a bunch of nonsense? I should really step up to the plate here. Frowning slightly as I considered the proper course of action, I stepped inside Aisha's room. She told me to stop by later, but she hadn't specified a time. It shouldn't be a problem if I waited for her here then. It's not like I just wanted to get a look around a young girl's room or anything, although I was a little curious, maybe. Well, looks like she keeps the place clean at least. Aisha's room was impressively tidy. Everything was put away in its proper place, and I couldn't see a single speck of dust anywhere. Her bed was neatly made, too. Here and there, I noticed a few slight girly touches. The stuffed toy on her bed was particularly conspicuous. It was a little guy, maybe 20 centimeters in height, with light brown hair, a robe, and a staff. He was supposed to be a magician, presumably. They didn't sell toys like these in this city, as far as I knew. Had she bought it from a traveling peddler or something? I don't even think Zenoba had anything like this in his collection, and that meant it had to be a pretty rare find. Maybe she'd made it herself. Nah, surely not. Aisha also had quite a few potted plants by her windows. Everything from tulip-like flowers to aloes and a little cactus. There were maybe 10 of them lined up together in pots of various sizes. Compared to Norn's room, the place looked a bit more like what you'd expect from a young girl's room. Wandering over to the corner, I opened up Aisha's closet and took a peek.
There were 3 full maid outfits inside. All of them were obviously well used and had some conspicuous patches here and there. They looked more like the clothes of a veteran maid than those of an 11-year-old kid. Aisha had been growing fast lately, so she'd presumably grow out of these entirely before too long, unless Lilia could modify them somehow. Glancing around again, I noticed a single cute, girly outfit hanging on the far side of the closet. It had lots of frills and everything. Maybe she was saving it for a special occasion. Hopefully this wasn't what she'd been wanting to show me. I'd have to pretend I hadn't already seen it. Closing the closet, I pulled open the drawer underneath it. One side of it was packed with neatly folded panties. For any boy with a crush on her, this would have been a real treasure trove. Next to her underwear were a number of shirts. And now that I got a closer look, a few bras, too. My little sister was well developed for her age, and already capable of equipping chest armor. Still, she was probably the equivalent of an A-cup at the moment. The wise old hermit had already classified her as a rare gem in the making, but it was early days yet. As I was contemplating my sister's clothes, a small thump from behind made my heart skip a beat. Activating my demon eye of foresight, I channeled mana into both my hands and spun around, making sure to close the drawer behind me. "Who's there?" I called, pointing my fingers toward the door. There was nothing there. No one I could see. Aisha and Zenith would still be occupied with the garden at the moment, and Lilia should be busy making lunch. Was it our pet armadillo then? No, he'd tagged along with Roxy when she headed to the university. He was probably taking a siesta on some table over there. Matsukaze, the horse I'd bought before leaving for Beggary, was housed in a stable in the city. Sometimes I'd head over there to check up on him, but I doubted he could make it all the way over here on his own. That just left Lucy, and she wasn't even crawling yet. Was it someone totally unexpected then? A burglar? A pervert looking to steal an innocent young girl's first bra? Lowering myself cautiously into a crouch, I glanced all around the room. I wasn't seeing anyone, and there weren't any good hiding places either. Still, something felt odd. My sharply honed intuition was telling me I wasn't alone in there. Could it be an invisible enemy? Maybe someone with a magical implement that provided perfect camouflage. In that case, the effect would have to wear off sooner or later. I guess we'll just have to see who blinks first then, I muttered quietly. Hopefully it wasn't just the house creaking or anything. I'd feel like a real idiot. No, there's definitely something off. I could feel it. Look closer, Rudius. What's changed in here? What's out of place? The stuffed toy? No, it's not that. The door's still closed. The bed's still made. The ceiling spotless as always. That leaves the potted plants. Yeah. Are there more of them than before? I don't think so. But I feel like I'm getting warmer here. As I stared at the plants, trying to find something out of the ordinary, the sun emerged from behind a cloud. A ray of light poured through Aisha's window. Thump, thump. Gah! The plant in the single smallest pot reacted instantly. It was wriggling around in there, trying to get more of itself in the sunbeam, twisting its leaves toward the window. With its every movement, the pot thumped slightly against the wooden windowsill. This was obviously what I'd heard a few moments ago as well. What the heck is this thing? I gave the plant a cautious poke, and it jerked in something like a surprise. After a moment, though, it leaned over to rub itself against my finger and began to slowly twine a shoot around it. A little taken aback, I pulled my finger away. The plant promptly went right back to bathing in the sun. A moving plant? How very bizarre. Hopefully it wasn't going to start dancing around the room and burst into song or anything. In all seriousness, though, I had some idea what this thing might be. I'd seen its kind many times before, after all. This thing was a treant. The creatures known as treants could be found all over the world. They were one of the most common and well-known categories of monsters. You might compare them to the slimes from Dragon Quest in that sense. I'd done a lot of traveling for my age, with journeys across the Demon Continent, the Millis Continent, the Central Continent, and the Begarit Continent. I hadn't gotten a chance to visit the Divine Continent yet. Unfortunately, but that was still 4 out of the major 5.
On every one of the continents I'd seen so far, there were treants of some kind. You'd find them in basically any forest, and they weren't uncommon in the plains and deserts either. Most of them were largely made of wood, but not all of them looked like walking trees. The stone treants resembled big, lumpy potatoes. The cactus treants looked like spiky green plants. And there were many other species too. I'd heard of elder treants capable of using water magic, for example. Still, I'd never seen a treant this small before. The thing was about 15 centimeters in height, maybe 20 if you counted its roots. It had 4 large leaves and 2 tendril-like shoots. I didn't see any flowers or fruits yet. It looked like a very young sapling, maybe. Accordingly, I decided to refer to it as a baby treant. Not that it really mattered, I just needed some way to refer to it. Now then, my main question at the moment was what our baby treant was doing in Aisha's room. Okay, Aisha, what's the deal with this thing? Well, it just started moving all of a sudden. Aisha, who'd come running at me at my cry of alarm, didn't appear to feel particularly guilty about the situation. When did that happen? Right after you came back from your trip, actually. What do you think? It's pretty cool, right? If anything, she'd seem proud of her little pet. Yeah, it's really something. Why didn't you tell me about this, though? I wanted to, but you've been so busy lately, you know? I thought it could wait a while. And now you went and found it on your own. And now you went and found it on your own. Aisha puffed out her cheeks sulkily. The effect was adorable, needless to say. Now I knew what she'd wanted to show me, at least. Well, anyway, I can't believe one of those seeds I brought back was actually a treant. What are the odds of that? Huh? No, I'm pretty sure it grew from some, Vaterus seeds we got back in Asura. Oh, really? Yeah, it's got leaves and tendrils, see? It should get some nice purple flowers before too long. I recognized the name of the plant. Its flowers were the primary ingredient in a powerful aphrodisiac, and it could also be used to make certain perfumes. They cultivated it in certain parts of the kingdom of Asura. That didn't explain why this one had turned into a treant, though. What made it start moving anyway? Was it like this from the start? Nope. It was just a plant at first. It started moving when I moved it into this spot. Aisha explained that she liked starting off her flowers in the garden outside before moving them into her pots. Once they grew big enough, she put them back into the yard. She was still experimenting at the moment, which was why the pots of the plants inside them were also different. The pot itself was a perfectly ordinary thing that we'd purchased together at a general goods store a while ago. I found it very unlikely that it was a magic item, or otherwise enchanted. You didn't do anything weird to it, did you? Nope. I treated it just like all the others. I'm using the soil you make for me. It seems to have more nutrients than the earth around here does. That probably ruled out the soil then. I always made her perfectly ordinary dirt with my magic. It wasn't something I put a lot of effort into. Maybe I threw a touch of affection for my little sister in there, but that didn't seem relevant. Oh, wait. Sometimes I gave it leftover water from the bath, I guess. Leftover bath water. I wasn't around at the time, so it would have been infused with Sylphie and Aisha's sweat. Maybe a bit of Nanahoshi's too. Intriguing. I could see how that might lead a plant to grow some gropey tentacles. Okay, Rudy is stop being an idiot. What could have caused this to happen then? She'd planted a normal seed and cultivated it normally, but somehow it had turned into a monster. Was that a thing that just happened sometimes? It felt more likely that a treant seed had been accidentally mixed in with the normal ones somehow. Treants were natural mimics. Maybe it was just pretending to be a normal Vaterus plant at first to stay inconspicuous. It felt like a coherent theory, at least. Well, in any case, I guess we should kill the thing, I muttered to myself. Maybe I could just burn it or something? What? Shrieked Aisha. Why? I spent all this time raising the little guy. Why would you burn him? I was a bit taken aback by how fiercely she objected, but then again, she'd brought me here to show off her treant. I guess it made sense that she wouldn't be too happy about getting rid of it. Aisha, you know what this thing is, right? It's a treant.
That's a kind of monster. But look how little it is! It's adorable! Yeah, for the moment. But once it gets bigger, it might start attacking people. It's dangerous. I'll train him! I'll make sure he doesn't hurt anyone! She was clinging to my waist desperately now, and there were tears in her eyes. I was sorely tempted to just say, "Oh, all right. I'm not cleaning up after it for you, though." Still, this wasn't a stray kitten we were talking about here. It was a monster. Come on, Rudius. Can't I keep it, please? The puppy dog eyes aren't going to work on me. We need to get rid of it. But he's a good boy, really. He's nice to everyone else, and he does whatever I tell him to. Now you're just making stuff up, Aisha. How is a treant going to do what you tell it? It doesn't even have ears. Look! Trotting over to the baby treant, Aisha reached out a hand toward it. The little creature reacted by slowly slipping one of its tendrils around her slender index finger. Without extracting herself from its grip, she gently rubbed its underside, or the underside of its leaves with her fingertip, and the baby treant twisted its body in something that looked like pleasure. It was kind of a bizarre sight. The thing looked exactly like a plant, but it was reacting like an animal. Okay, let go, said Aisha. The treant immediately uncoiled its tendril from around her finger, letting it rest in the palm of her hand. Which one's the pinky finger? After a moment's hesitation, the tendril slipped around her pinky. Middle finger. The tendril released her pinky and took hold of her middle finger. Don't let go, but grab my thumb too. Still wrapped around the middle finger, the tendril reached out further, obediently stretching towards Aisha's thumb. It wasn't long enough to grab it, but it just barely managed to touch her fingertip. Okay, let go. She kept playing with the treant this way for a while longer, then turned back to face me. See? He listens to what I tell him, right? Yeah, it looks that way. To my surprise, it was clearly possible to communicate with this thing, and from the looks of things, it was very attached to my little sister. I needed to rethink things a little here. Treants were monsters. This was just a fact. In my experience, they disguised themselves as trees or other plants, then launched vicious surprise attacks on any travelers who came by. Still, I knew there were some species of monster out there that could be domesticated. Creatures like Dillo, our family pet, and the lizard I rode around on the demon continent weren't usually thought of as monsters. People usually just called them beasts. But there was nothing that inherently separated them from monsters, other than their temperament. This baby treant seemed tame enough, so maybe I didn't have to classify it as a monster. It honestly wasn't that threatening either. Dillo could surely do a lot more damage than this thing if he wanted to. That said, Dillo had been domesticated by a professional beast tamer, or trainer. Look, I'm a little worried this thing might try to strangle you in your sleep, honestly. I think it should be fine, Rudius. Even full-grown Vatirius plants only get about twice this big. Okay, but if he hurts anyone ever, I'll do what you say. I promise. What if you get seriously injured the first time he attacks, though? Grr. Aisha puffed out her cheeks sulkily at this, but then seemed to reconsider her strategy. Opening her eyes real wide, she laced her hands together in front of her chest and looked up at me with her most sweet and innocent expression. Please, Rudius, can't you give me a chance? Where the heck did she learn to plead like that? Not subtle, kid. I was tempted to pursue the point, but right now there were more pressing matters at hand. Okay, let's see. I was positive I'd never heard of anyone domesticating a treant before. I didn't know much about their behavior either, so it was hard to say what the best way to train one was. Most importantly, they were dangerous monsters, albeit fairly weak ones. If we messed this up even slightly, things might turn ugly very fast. And then again, if it really was going to max out at 30 centimeters in height, there wasn't that much it could do to hurt us. Aisha had raised the thing herself from a seed, so it was accustomed to having people around. That made it less likely it would attack one of us, assuming it was like an ordinary animal in that respect. Clearly irritated by my indecisiveness, Aisha began to pound. All right then, if that's how you're going to be, maybe I should play my trump card. Your trump card? Why don't I tell Sylphie and Roxy about your little secret? What are you talking about? Was I keeping any terrible secrets from the two of them? Nothing really came to mind. But then, smirking haughtily, Aisha dropped the bomb on me. I'm talking about your secret room in the basement. Gah! Everyone has a part of themselves they want to keep private. In my case, it was that little altar downstairs. That room was a sacred place that I visited only in the night, offering my prayers as my family slumbered. My goddesses were now physically present in my house, true, but that didn't make the ritual any less meaningful for me. Faith has value in and of itself, you know? The act of prayer calms us and centers us, helping us live each day to the fullest. I'd been keeping up this routine for years now. It was a part of my life. But what would happen if my altar was discovered? What would Sylvie think? What would Roxy say? I wanted to think that Lilia would understand at least. Aisha had evidently been keeping quiet about it. But what about Norn? I had the feeling she'd react with open disgust. The ultimate outcome would likely be the destruction of my altar, and with it, I would lose a crucial part of my daily routine. Aisha, listen, I'm just worried about your safety, okay? Treants are dangerous monsters, so raising one might put you at risk. I don't care if you're a total pervert, Rudius, but I wonder how Sylvie and Roxy will feel about it. Especially Roxy. You've been worshipping her panties for a long time now, haven't you? Ah, this girl is ruthless. I was just trying to watch out for her, and now she's blackmailing me. Damn it! What am I supposed to do? What's the least bad option here? As I racked my brains for an answer, the door to Aisha's bedroom suddenly swung open behind us. I think I heard my name just now. Did you need something? Gah! Aisha and I spun around to find Roxy standing in the doorway, looking a bit nonplussed. What are you doing here, Roxy? I sputtered. Didn't you just leave a little while ago? I came back to get something I forgot. Fortunately, I don't have a class at the moment. Classic Roxy, the forgetful little professor. How cute. Wait, let's try to stay focused here. Well, Roxy, Rudius and I were just talking about this secret. Now I'd gone and covered up my little sister's mouth mid-sentence. What now? An awkward silence ensued. The only sounds were the soft thumps of the baby treant wriggling on the windowsill. Roxy's eyes jumped over to it and opened wide with surprise. Okay, maybe I can turn this to my advantage. Roxy should take my side on this, right? I'm sure she knows how dangerous treants are. That's a treant, isn't it? Asked Roxy curiously. Right, yeah, I said. Aisha just told me she wants to raise that thing as a pet. But treants are monsters, you know. It could be dangerous. Can you help me convince her to get rid of it? Aisha grabbed at my hand, which was muffling her cries of protest, and tried to pry it away. Foolish girl, you can't beat me in a contest of strength. Bite my fingers if you want. I won't let go. Gah, wait, don't lick them. Stop, that's fighting dirty. I don't know, Rudy. I think it should be fine. Huh? She's taking Aisha's side? Treants are loyal creatures if you raise them properly, Roxy continued. And this one's rather small, too. There shouldn't be much danger to speak of. Wait, really? You can domesticate them? Sure. It doesn't seem to be very common in this continent, but the meager tribe used treants to scare birds away from their fields. Did they really? Huh. Maybe. My memories of that visit were a little fuzzy at this point. Oh, right, they had those things that looked like piranha plants out in the fields. I hadn't realized they were treants, though. In any case, it sounded like Aisha was right after all, so I released her from my clutches. Sorry, Aisha. Sounds like I was wrong about this one. She looked up at me dubiously for a moment, but eventually smiled in relief. That's okay, Rudius. You were just worried about me, right? Yeah, of course. You have to admit, raising a monster sounds like it could be dangerous. Okay, then. I guess I'll keep quiet after all. Thanks, Aisha. Remind me to buy you a nice meal one of these days. Will do. Spinning away from me, Aisha promptly ran over to Roxy and threw her arms around her. Thanks, big sis. I love you. You're welcome, I suppose. Roxy accepted the hug, but looked as perplexed as ever. From that forth, Aisha's baby treant joined the household as our second pet. Naturally, I laid down some rules and conditions beforehand.
First and most importantly, if it ever hurt someone, we'd get rid of it immediately. Second, Aisha needed to thoroughly train it not to attack anyone. Third, she had to explain to everyone exactly what kind of plant it was. Fourth, she wasn't going to let it near any babies, just to be on the safe side. And so on and so forth. I delivered these rules to Aisha in the form of a strict lecture, but she nodded in agreement to every one of them without so much as a scowl. The girl kept her promises, fortunately, so this would probably work out fine. Incidentally, I gave our little friend the name Bite? Bit? B-Y-T. Yeah. Picking out a few letters from the words baby treant. So maybe it is Bit. I don't know. Hopefully he would develop into a trustworthy and helpful member of our family. I was already picturing him planted out in Aisha's field, defending me, my precious rice crops from predators. How the hell had the girl found my secret altar, though? You really had to keep an eye on these maids. Legends of the University number 4. The boss had tamed monsters living in his house. Chapter 5. Paternal Dignity. Before I knew it, 3 more months had slipped past. It was summer now. The snow had melted completely, and we'd landed in the middle of a hot, dry stretch. So far, I'd spent most of this year mooning over Lucy. Whenever I had a little spare time, I'd use it looking at her. She was my first and only child, after all. It was only natural for me to adore her. On this day, like many other days, I was hanging around in her bedroom, watching her quietly. Whenever I gazed down on that angelic, chubby-cheeked little face, it put a big, goofy grin on mine. However, I was technically the head of this household now. I didn't exactly exude authority, but I did want to act in a relatively dignified fashion around my wives and sisters. If I spent too much time cooing over my baby like an idiot, their opinion of me would surely be affected. For this reason, I intended to be a stern father. You know, tough but fair, that sort of thing. If I knew Paul, he'd probably had similar thoughts looking down on me as a baby. A father should inspire awe in his children. He should be an example to them, and a goal for them to reach. At one point, I'd thought of Paul as pitiful, or even pathetic, but by now I knew better. He'd been a magnificent father. He had his flaws, and plenty of them. But he was wonderful nonetheless. To be sure, he wasn't the most faithful husband out there, but I didn't have much right to criticize him on that point. It was better to focus on the positives. At this point, I could say with confidence that I wanted to follow in my father's... Uh-oh, she's fussing again. I didn't have Sylphie to rely on today, so I had to step up to the plate myself. Here we go, Lucy. It's your daddy. Oh, Lord, she is so cute. Is there anything in the world as adorable as this baby's smile? My wife somehow gave birth to a literal angel by mistake. There's no other explanation for this. I got a little sidetracked there for a moment. Let's get back to the stern and dignified thing. The way I saw it, the ideal father was close enough to his children to be caring, but distant enough to guide them forward. Normally, he should be kind and gentle with his kids. When necessary, however, he shouldn't hesitate to give them a firm scolding. And when they really needed his support, he should always step up to the plate for them. That was the ideal father as I saw it. It sort of sounded like I was just describing my impression of Paul. Was he my idea of a perfect dad, then? I didn't want my children thinking of me as pathetic, to be honest. But then again, it was partially Paul's weaknesses that endeared me to him. There were lots of lessons I could learn from his example. Also, though he might have looked pitiful to me sometimes, he had always been a wonderful dad to Norn. That much was obvious, considering how much she'd adored him. In that case, maybe love and compassion was the most Oh no, she's getting worked up again. Hello, Lucy. Daddy's back. I'm gonna pick you up, okay? Here we go. As soon as I picked Lucy up out of her cradle and began to rock her back and forth, she started cackling loudly. Judging from the cherubic smile on her face, She liked being cradled in my big, strong arms. My heart couldn't take much more of this cuteness. Rudius. Yes, Suzanne? As I comforted Lucy, her wet nurse, Suzanne, had spoken up from across her room. Suzanne was a retired adventurer and an old friend of mine. I don't mind I don't mind soothing the little baby when she fusses, you know. It's part of the job. Appreciate the offer, but I'd like to keep these blissful moments to myself, thank you very much. The two of us had gotten to know each other back when I was just starting off as a solo adventurer. We'd fallen out of contact for about 4 years, but then she'd seen my posting for a wet nurse job. It had been a real shock seeing her again. Huh. Well, if you really want to do it yourself, feel free. Is there any man in the world who doesn't want to soothe their newborn daughter? Can't say my husband's too eager to deal with it. How shameful. It sounds like he needs an education on the joys of fatherhood. I remembered the time I spent with Suzanne very clearly. I'd been only 12 years old, newly dumped by Eris, and making my way to the Northern Territories alone, feeling extremely sorry for myself. Words cannot describe how miserable it made me to have to dissolve our old party, Dead End, at the guild in Basharant. As a way of distracting myself from my feelings, I immediately tried to take on an extremely difficult and dangerous task all by myself. That was when Suzanne and her party had stepped in. Their group had 2 warriors, 1 archer, 1 healer, and 1 mage. They were a B-rank party, but all of them were experienced veterans. Suzanne was one of the frontline warriors. To be honest, she wasn't that impressive of a swordswoman, or anything. In terms of combat skill, she was closer to the bottom of rank B than the top. However, she had a reputation for kindness, and she knew how to keep a party running smoothly. When she noticed me trying to take a suicide mission, she walked right over and said something like, "How about we do that job together?" I protested that I was trying to make a name for myself as a solo adventurer, but she argued that I needed to work with people to build a reputation. In the end, I let her talk me into working together. At the time, Suzanne was alarmed by just how rough I looked. My eyes were dull and lifeless, and she could tell I wasn't sleeping much at all. When I spoke to her in a carefully polite tone, she'd found it creepy rather than reassuring. Nonetheless, she took me in and helped me out. Until the day I left that first city behind, her party took me along on all sorts of quests. They even invited me to join them on a permanent basis. I ended up rejecting the offer, but they were always friendly to me when we bumped into each other. Sometimes they'd even pull me into a tavern for a meal. Looking back on it now, it was obvious they were looking out for me in all sorts of ways. I was grateful to all of them. After we went our separate ways, Suzanne had married Timothy, the mage and leader of their party. They'd moved back here together since Sharia happened to be Timothy's hometown. They had 2 kids together. Unfortunately, their third had been born prematurely and died soon after. Suzanne's body was still producing milk despite the death of her child, so she decided to sell her services as a wet nurse. She'd been looking through the job postings when she happened to see my name. Incidentally, I'd stopped by to say hello to Timothy just a few days earlier. The man hadn't changed a bit. Gotta say, though, you sure have changed. Have I? Yeah. Back in the old days, you never would have insulted a woman's husband in front of her. Oh, wait, no. Okay. I thought this was a memory of... Okay. So hold on. Gotta say, though, you sure have changed. Have I? Yeah. Back in the old days, you never would have insulted a woman's husband in front of her. This was true. When I first met Suzanne, I was terrified of upsetting people. I still didn't want to offend anyone if I could possibly avoid it, but I guess I wasn't walking on eggshells these days. A lot of things had happened since then. Sorry, Suzanne. Did I upset you? Nah, a little teasing never hurt anyone, you know? As long as you're saying it to my face, it's all good. Makes me more comfortable, if anything. It probably had something to do with the friends I'd made at the university. I had more people I could talk to casually these days. Zenoba and Cliff both preferred it that way, and it was easier for me as well. Hell, you could stand to be a little more casual around me in general, Suzanne continued. You're technically my employer, you know? I suppose so, but that's no reason to treat you impolitely. Suzanne rolled her eyes at that. Whatever you say, kid. I owed Suzanne a lot. At the end of the day, she was the one who taught me the ropes of adventuring in the Northern Territories. I couldn't bring myself to be too casual with her.
Well, I guess it's all good with me as long as I get my paycheck.
Of course. I'll tip you handsomely, I assure you. The woman talked like it was all about the money, but she'd been wonderful so far. I'd been a little nervous at first, since I remembered some horror stories about sadistic babysitters from my previous life. But Suzanne was so tender with Lucy that you'd never have known she wasn't her mother. Of course, we did have Lilia and Aisha hanging around the house too, around the house to keep an eye on things, and I knew from the start she wasn't the kind of person who'd mistreat a child.
How are your sons doing, by the way? Ah, the boys are a real handful as always. They're running Grandma and Grandpa ragged.
Suzanne and Timothy were living with Timothy's parents at the moment. It was the only reason she was able to work full-time as a wet nurse, with 2 toddlers running around the house. She regularly complained to Lilia about how tough it was to be living under the same roof as her mother-in-law. Lilia was probably more inclined to identify with the mother-in-law, but I guess she was about Suzanne's age. It seemed like they got along. I saw them drinking tea together every once in a while.
I've been wondering, did you want a boy first, too?
Not really. Why would I?
Well, you know, everybody wants an heir, right?
Ah, sure. I'd had a few discussions like this after my daughter was born. Zenobia and Ariel had both brought it up as well. It was obviously an important issue to royal families and noble houses back in Osira. I'd even heard stories of newborn boys being whisked away from distant relatives for adoption by the main Boreas family.
The thing is, though, I'm not really a noble or a wealthy businessman. It doesn't really bother me either way. I just want to see my kid grow up happy.
If anything, I was pleased to have received the cuter option. I was seriously outnumbered in this house, true, but I can't say I minded being surrounded by adorable girls and charming women. It wasn't like they were bullying me either. They were almost too nice.
Hey, that's the spirit. Wish my husband would take a page out of your book. The moment I got pregnant, he was talking about all the stuff he wanted to do if it turned out to be a boy. Didn't spare a minute's thought for the alternative.
Well, you got your boys in the end, so I guess it turned out all right.
Yeah, I guess. I've got some mixed feelings about it, though. The third one was a girl, you know?
Ah, right. Sorry, that was a dumb thing to say. For an instant, I found myself wondering how I would have felt if Lucy had been stillborn. Just the thought of it was horrible enough.
It's fine. We'll just try again.
Suzanne seemed almost nonchalant about it, though. Was losing a baby really something you could shrug off like that? At the very least, I knew I would have taken it hard. It wasn't easy for Sylvie to get pregnant, so there was no telling how long it would take for us to get another shot. And more importantly, Sylvie would have been devastated. It was easy to picture her crying her eyes out and apologizing to me for losing our child. God, just thinking about this was making my stomach hurt. There wasn't any point in dwelling on it, right? Lucy had come out fine and Sylvie was okay too. Enough time had passed that I felt relatively confident it wasn't just a dream. Rather than thinking about how things could have gone wrong, I should be enjoying my good fortune.
So... Oh, wait. So, anyway, I'm assuming you guys dissolved your party at some point, right? Yeah, not long after you left town. When you're as mediocre as we were, it gets pretty tough when you lose a core party member, you know? Patrice said he was going back to Asura to become a soldier, and we sort of fell apart on the spot.
Do you know what happened to Sarah?
You curious?
Yeah, a little. Sarah was the name of an archer who'd belonged to Suzanne's party. It was rare for an adventurer to rely on a bow and arrows, but she had a real talent for landing timely, accurate shots in battle, which made her quite effective at her role. We were relatively close in age, and she'd been openly hostile to me at first, but over time we'd gotten increasingly friendly. In the end, our budding relationship imploded thanks to my performance issues, but I was still a bit interested in how she was doing now.
Well, she's still out there making a living as an adventurer. You don't see many archers around, since it's a lot easier to learn how to fling a fireball, but she's got the skills and experience now. She'll be just fine anywhere she goes.
Ah, okay.
If there's anything you left unsaid, You should probably go find her sooner rather than later. Never know when an adventurer might get themselves killed. I don't think that's really necessary. Our little fling was in the past now. Finding her to talk about it wasn't going to do me any good. It was hard to imagine that Sarah would enjoy remembering that whole mess either. Well, if you say so. Suddenly, Suzanne's eyes flicked away from me and toward the door. When I turned around, I saw Zenith standing there quietly. Lilia was lurking just behind her. Mom? Zenith made no reply, of course, but Lilia nodded. Pardon the intrusion, Master Rudius. No. Pardon the intrusion, Master Rudius. Her eyes a bit unfocused, Zenith slowly stepped forward, then sat down next to me, positioning herself so she could get a good look at Lucy's face. Don't worry, Mom. Lucy's doing just fine today. This got no reaction whatsoever. Zenith just stared at the baby so intently she seemed to have forgotten anyone else was even in the room. After her arrival at my house, I felt like she'd become noticeably more active. When Norn was around, she tried to feed her at the dinner table. When she spotted Aisha, they'd go out to the garden and pull weeds together. And when I was watching Lucy, she'd stop like this. There were subtle differences in how she reacted to Roxy and Sylphie, too. Her facial expression never seemed to change, and she still hadn't spoken a word, but she was moving. She was changing. Maybe she was inching her way back to something like a recovery. Yeah. Zenith had reached out her hands, smiling from ear to ear. Lucy grabbed at them playfully. Aw, little Lucy sure does love her grandma, doesn't she? At first I'd been nervous about this. Zenith's symptoms were comparable to something like dementia. I'd worried she might harm Lucy for no reason at all, without even meaning to. By this point, though, it was obvious that we had nothing to worry about. All she ever did was watch Lucy quietly. I'd never gotten a hint of a negative emotion from her. If anything, she seemed like a normal woman gazing peacefully down at her grandchild. I felt a bit guilty for having doubted her in the first place. It wasn't like she had ever gotten violent with anyone before. On some level, it seemed like Lucy understood that she meant well, too. The kid was all smiles whenever Zenith visited. It was honestly pretty heartwarming. Aww. But of course, there was a lot we didn't know about Zenith's condition, and how it might develop. It was hard to imagine anything bad coming of these visits, but given how much was still uncertain, it was probably best for them to stay supervised. After all, accidents can happen, even when your intentions are good. Suddenly, Zenith looked up at me. It almost looked like she was trying to send me a message with her eyes. Not that I had any idea what it might be. Wah. Seconds later, Lucy started fussing loudly. Pardon me, Miss Zenith. Lilia reached down and gently took Lucy away from me and Zenith. Suzanne came over and received the baby. She started soothing her while simultaneously checking her diaper and looking for rashes. After a moment, though, she nodded. Looks like somebody's hungry. Was it that time already? Sylphie had breastfed her before leaving, but somehow a couple hours must have slipped by since then. Well then, I guess I'll step out of the room. I don't mind if you watch, you know. It was kind of Suzanne to offer, but I declined politely. We were old friends and all, but that didn't make it okay for me to see the breasts of a married woman. She was just as well endowed as Zenith or Lilia, too. They actually seemed a little bigger than before. Maybe it was all the milk in there. If I got a glimpse of those things, the wise old hermit inside me might be roused from his slumber. That in itself might not be such a big deal. But what if Lilia, say, were to mention it to the others? Sylphie and Roxy might be disheartened. It was an undeniable fact that they were more on the flat-chested side of the spectrum. But I didn't choose women based on their bodies. I didn't want them feeling self-conscious about it. In any case, was it just me or had Zenith noticed that Lucy was ready to be fed? Maybe you pick up a sixth sense for that kind of thing after raising 3 children of your own. I walked out into the hallway and glanced through the nearest window. Unfortunately, it was a gray and rainy day. It was hard to guess exactly what the time might be, but since Lucy had gotten hungry, it was probably close to noon. Somehow I'd managed to spend my entire morning hanging out with the baby. But it was time well spent, in my opinion. Nothing was more important than spending time with your kid. For the moment, though, I headed to my study, a small room on the first floor that I'd reserved for my research. The desk inside was covered in handwritten reports and a few magic stones. I hadn't spent the last 6 months playing with my daughter and my sisters to the exclusion of anything else. I'd also been studying the prizes I brought back from the Begarit continent. It was these stones that had lent the Hydra its ability to shrug off my spells, forcing us into dangerous close-range combat. They absorbed any magic that came into contact with them. At a glance, they looked like ordinary light green scales. If not for their transparency, they wouldn't even have been identifiable as stones. I'd managed to learn a few basic facts about these from the library at the University of Magic. First of all, they were usually referred to as stones of absorption. Manatite hydras produced them naturally within their bodies. Since that species of monster had gone extinct thousands of years ago during the continental sundering, they were now incredibly rare and valuable. Many dragons produced magical stones or crystals inside their bodies. This was just one particularly unusual case in point. The stone in my staff, for example, had been retrieved from a draconic species of sea serpent. The effects of these stones varied widely, but many of them had different magical applications of some sort. Some could increase your magical capacity or reduce the amount of mana it took to cast spells. Others made your spells twice as powerful without increasing their mana cost. It wasn't that surprising that there was one capable of absorbing magic entirely. The tricky part was figuring out how exactly these stones were doing that. When you just left them sitting on a desk like this, the stones of absorption didn't actively suck the mana out of everything around them. Clearly, something had to happen first. After a bit of experimentation, I soon realized that the stones had a front and a back. It was very hard to tell one side from the other, but they definitely existed. When I placed my hand on the back of a stone and fed it some mana, the front side would begin absorbing magic while emitting a high-pitched whine. In other words, these things didn't work automatically. You had to turn them on and off yourself. It was a little bit like the suction pads on the tentacles of an octopus. It seemed that the Hydra we fought had been activating its magic-absorbing armor as it saw the spells fly, rendering my attacks useless at the last second. I had a hard time imagining many people could react as quickly, but wild animals can often have much better dynamic vision and reflexes than any human being. Experimenting further, I also realized that the stone didn't exactly absorb magic in the way I'd been expecting. When I held it in my right hand and cast a spell at it with the other, the spell would disappear. But I didn't regain the mana that I'd spent. In fact, I was pretty sure it was costing me some mana, the same amount I'd used to cast the original spell. It would take more focused experiments to be sure what this meant, but I did have a working hypothesis. Basically, I suspected that the stone was converting the mana I fed it into waves that could instantly disintegrate anything else made of mana. Fuck. The results were similar to the spell Disturb Magic, but I felt like these stones were even more thorough at obliterating the spells that they interacted with. There were still many things this theory alone couldn't explain, of course. For example, figurines I'd created with magic were completely unaffected by the stones, even at point-blank range. Earthen figurines were immune to the waves, but the projectile from my stone cannon wasn't. I had no idea why that would be the case. Maybe the mana of the figurines had stabilized over time, making them immune to disruption. There wasn't much point going down these rabbit holes, though. I didn't even have a good grasp of what mana really was. Rather than groping around for a comprehensive explanation, I wanted to focus on how I could use these things, and how I could counteract them in the future. With that thought in mind, I'd carried out another experiment. I had the feeling that I could use these stones to destroy some things Disturb Magic couldn't. Magic circles, for example. Cliff had helped me out with this experiment. As I'd hoped, I managed to destroy both a barrier spell and the magic circle he'd used to cast it. The design on his original scroll was unaffected, but as long as the spell was in active use, the stones of absorption could erase the circle itself. However, they weren't able to affect a magic circle on the inside of a magical implement. Maybe it was because the circle was carved into the implement itself, rather than drawn on its surface. That would make sense.
Thinking back on our battle with the Hydra, I realized that it never deactivated the magic circle in its lair despite thrashing around all over the place. In any case, the most important takeaway was that these scales couldn't destroy everything of a magical nature. That said, they were probably more than effective enough to deal with most threats I might encounter. With one of these in my back pocket, I could break myself out the next time I blundered into a trap and landed on the inside of a barrier spell. Ideally, I would avoid blundering into traps in the first place, but it never hurt to have an insurance policy. At the moment, I was thinking about incorporating one of the stones into my prosthetic hand somewhere, maybe in the palm. It might be tricky to use that hand for both activating the stone and casting magic, but hopefully I'd get the hang of it with some practice.
Hello, brother dear. You have a guest.
I'd been tinkering around in my study for some time when Aisha popped her head in to announce that we had visitors. Her face was calm and composed. She'd snapped into professional maid mode.
Who is it? Prince Zenoba. He's waiting for you in the living room.
Wonder if he needs something. Not that I'd mind if he just came over on a whim, of course. Maybe he just wanted some company. Got it. Thanks, Aisha. I pushed myself up off my seat casually. Zenoba had been making progress on his own research into the automaton recently. My Zalif prosthesis had been a product of those efforts, and as it turned out, the automaton's legs and feet worked similarly to the hands and arms. I'd helped make the prototype this time. Zenoba drew up the plans. I created the model section by section. I created the model section by section with my magic, and Cliff inscribed it with necessary magic circles. It was a slow, delicate process. We'd spent nearly a month making a single leg. Someday, we'd hopefully be selling them alongside our artificial hands, but we were a long way from mass producing these things. Anyway, now that we'd gotten a good grasp of the limbs, Zenoba was finally starting to investigate the automaton's body. This involved locating the fine seams between its sections, and then carefully cutting them apart to study the innards. Right at the center of its chest, he'd found a magic stone. It was a pretty red crystalline thing of unusual size. After studying it, however, he realized that it wasn't actually just a single stone. It was a combination of numerous smaller ones, each covered in tiny magic circles. Jesus. This was clearly the automaton's core. If we managed to decipher all the patterns etched into it, we could theoretically be capable of making the same thing ourselves. And then, once we took our research to even greater heights, the Robo-Maid dream would finally become a reality. Unfortunately, Zenoba was struggling in the face of his new challenge. The circles on the core were unbelievably strange and complex. What's more, the patterns were full of snatches of ancient writing, notes, warnings, passages from obscure books, and preliminary scratched-out designs. Basically, it was clear that the creator of the automaton had still been perfecting the design for the core, even as they built it. It seemed that the masterpiece he'd found was in fact a failure or prototype. There was no telling what its creator had actually been going for. Making sense of all this was going to be much harder than any challenge we'd faced so far, but Zenoba was undaunted. He seemed, if anything, even more determined than before to carry out his life's mission. For whatever it was worth, he had my moral support. "Hey, Zenoba, sorry to keep you waiting." When I walked into the living room, Zenoba jumped up from the sofa where he'd been sipping tea a moment earlier. "Ah, Master Rudius! My apologies for intruding on you like this." Julie and Ginger, who were standing in the corner of the room, followed his example and lowered their heads silently. "So, what can I do for you today?" "I was simply in the neighborhood, so I thought I'd drop by and say hello." "Huh, so it really was just a social call." "Got it. Well, make yourself at home." This was unusual behavior for Zenoba, but I wasn't going to turn him away or anything. As I settled down onto a chair, Julie trotted over to my side.
"Look, Grandmaster Rudius, I finished another one."
She held out a figurine for my examination. It was her latest attempt at a Regard figure that I had her reproducing as an assignment. "Nice work," I said, studying it from multiple angles. "You're improving quickly. Keep churning them out for me, all right?"
"Okay,"
Julie said with a cheerful bow. While I was off journeying across the Begarit continent, Julie had finished her original Regard figurine. I'd been genuinely surprised by how good it looked.
It was clear she'd used my own version as a model, but in all honesty, it was hers was just better. For one thing, the stance was perfect. Even a total amateur was going to realize they were looking at a total badass. When I showed it to Norn, she couldn't help murmuring, "I want one," under her breath, so I gave the original to her as a present. She had it on a shelf in her dorm room at the moment. Recognizing Julie's success for what it was, I tasked her with producing as many copies of the figurine as she could. It still took her quite a while to make a single one, but that wasn't really a big deal. The job was a good way to work on stretching her mana capacity, and hopefully we'd have a nice pile of them ready to go by the time we were ready to sell Norn's book. Yesterday, I saw Miss Norn at school. Oh yeah? You bumped into each other? Did she say anything? She thanked me, so I thanked her too. Ah, that's nice. Good for you, Julie. I reached out and patted Julie on the head affectionately. She stiffened up a little at my touch, but didn't flinch away. As it happened, Nord had recently finished her book about Regerd, even after she started learning the sword from me. She'd kept up with her writing. The book was short, and the prose was a bit clumsy and awkward. It only covered one part of Regerd's life, too. The story of those cursed spears, beginning with Regerd's loyal service to his lord and ending with his revenge. But despite all its flaws, she'd managed to capture Regerd's personality perfectly. His pride, his grief, and his boldness came across with startling clarity. With a bit of careful editing, I was confident we could sell it as a children's book. In order to test that theory, I'd read the draft to Julie, who absolutely loved it. She made me read it 3 times in a row, and probably would have kept going if Ginger hadn't intervened. From the sound of things, nobody had ever read Julie stories like that when she was little. Perhaps it was a cultural thing. The dwarves apparently had traditional fairy tales of some kind, but maybe they didn't write books for children. Or maybe her parents were just too busy to spend much time entertaining her. Not that it really mattered either way. Anyway, since Julie had enjoyed the book so much, I'd been planning to introduce her to Norn one of these days, but it seemed they'd beat me to the punch. Norn had probably been a little embarrassed to learn she had a fan already. It was nice to hear they'd gotten off on the right foot, though. Recognizing each other's talents is a good first step toward building a good working relationship. All of this meant we were making excellent progress on the preparations for our spurred PR campaign. I was keeping up with my research and my training too. Overall, I felt good about how I was using my time. If I pushed myself to take on anything more than I was already handling, I'd probably be overloading myself. Maybe it would have been optimal to focus on a single specific area in which to specialize, but my feeling was that I'd never be the best at anything I tried. That was true in my first try at life, and it was probably true in this one too. There's always going to be someone better than you out there. Maybe I was the best mage at the university right now, but the world was full of unbelievably powerful people. There's such a thing as genuine talent, the kind of talent you can't compete with, no matter how hard you try. I didn't feel any need to push myself to be the very best at any one thing, though. My goal was to be flexible enough to compete on multiple fronts. If I couldn't beat someone in a one-on-one fight, I'd just find a way to slip around them. It sounded good in theory, but of course, sometimes you might find yourself staring down a manatite hydra. I wanted to become powerful enough to defend my family if nothing else. Fighting wasn't really my specialty, but I'd have to find ways to get stronger. Oh, right. You want to take a look at Lucy, Zenoba? Oh, you're willing to show me your daughter? Are you sure? I mean, yeah. Is there some reason why I wouldn't? I suppose not. However, I believe there are certain countries where it's traditional to wait until a child turns 5 before letting anyone outside the family see them. Really? Huh. I'd rather show her off to everyone I can, personally. In any case, there was no reason to think too hard about all this right now. I just had to keep moving slowly, steadily forward. I was keeping up with my daily training and magic exercises, chipping away at my research projects, and making lots of interesting friends compared to my last try at life. I'd been putting in a lot more effort and getting a lot more out of every day. It was fair to say I was doing a good job so far, but by my standards at least. In other words, there was no need to rush things. If I pushed myself too hard, I'd eventually break down physically or mentally. My haste might make me careless, too. I didn't want to blunder into another disaster like I had with the Hydra. So for now, I was going to keep moving at my own pace, one step at a time. I wanted to make my efforts at self-improvement a part of my daily routine. Hopefully that effort would pay off the next time I found myself facing a real challenge. What was the next step? What was the next step I should take at this point, though? I'd replaced my hand with a prosthetic. My research was coming along nicely. My relationship with my wives were excellent. My sisters and daughter were doing well, and our family had a solid financial safety net. Maybe it was about time I had Roxy teach me some king-tier water magic. Legends of the University, number 5. The boss has a soft spot for little kids. Chapter 6. A Water King is Born. Hold on. Okay. In a normally quiet corner of the University of Magic, a suggestive conversation was taking place. No, I said no! The place, a small building known to certain students as the PE storage shed. In front of its door, a young man had seized a blue-haired girl by the arm. Come on, what's the big deal? I'm begging you here. Teach no means no. The girl's attitude was one of curt rejection. Her face was turned to one side, and she was pouting in displeasure. But the young man wasn't backing down. Just this one time, please. I've already given you my answer. Let go of me, please. Lunch is ending soon. Hey, don't be like that. It was clear he had no intention of releasing her. The girl looked around the area, her expression troubled. This was a quiet corner of the campus, but that didn't mean it was deserted. There were several people in the area, but when the girl shot them pleading glances, everyone simply looked away. There was a simple reason for this. They were afraid of the young man harassing her. He was the most infamous delinquent in this entire city. It wasn't that they didn't want to help the girl, but they all knew that any attempt at the intervention would likely be pointless, and might well cost them dearly. None were brave enough to risk it. Think it over for a minute, okay? This is a win-win arrangement we're talking about. You might not like the idea right now, but in the long run, we're both going to benefit. Well, I suppose, yes. Hey, how about this? If you do this for me, I'll do anything you want in return. Look, I just... As the girl's resolve faltered, the young man pressed his advantage ruthlessly. He moved in closer, nearly pressing his mouth to her ear as he whispered honeyed words. The girl's face was growing redder by the moment, fiddling with her long braided hair. She looked down at the ground in embarrassment. Hey, it's the student council. But at that very moment, the most handsome man in the university arrived on the scene. A conspicuous white-haired girl in sunglasses followed close behind him. Oh, it's Sir Luke! Silent Fitz is here, too! The relieved onlookers recognized these new arrivals immediately. They were Luke and Fitz of the Students' Council. Sir Luke is so dashing! What perfect timing! Take me now, Luke! Is it just me, or has Fitz gotten a lot cuter lately? Man, I never would have guessed she was a girl! Ignoring the shrill cries of their audience, the two of them strode up to the young man and the girl. Well, Rudius, we're here because someone reported you were assaulting a female student, but Luke trailed off mid-sentence to heave a heavy sigh. He knew both of the participants in this little farce, Rudius Greyrat and his second wife, Roxy. The girl wasn't a student, in other words, and Rudius hadn't been assaulting her. Having confirmed these facts, Luke turned around and started walking back the way he'd came. Fitz, you deal with this, please. Scratching at her ears awkwardly, Fitz nodded. Right. As the young knight left the scene, Roxy let out a long sigh of her own. A female student? Really? You can't blame them, teacher. You can't blame them, teacher, said Rudius, nodding
indulgently. Most of the students aren't aware that you're a professor yet. At this point, he looked over at Silent Fitz for support and found her looking displeased, puffing her cheeks out silently. What's the matter, Sylphie? I'm sorry, this scenario is just too hilarious, and I'm glad I knew immediately it was Rudy and Roxy. Oh, shit, that's funny. Look, Rudy, I know Roxy is your wife, but that doesn't mean you can force her to do something she doesn't want to. Sometimes a girl just isn't in the mood, you know? Huh? Right. Right. Absolutely, said Rudius, looking a bit nonplussed. Honestly, Fitz muttered, maybe she's better at this stuff, but you could try asking me instead. Wait, hold on. Could this be... Suddenly, Rudius's eyes lit up, stepping quickly over to Fitz. He poked at her cheek with his finger. She responded by turning her head the other way and puffing out her cheeks even further. It is! You're jealous, Sylphie! With this exclamation, he threw his arms around Fitz and squeezed her tightly. Fitz didn't seem entirely displeased, but she didn't stop scowling either. I wouldn't say I'm jealous, really. More like disappointed. Don't worry, honey. I won't leave you out. We'll do this together. What? Are you serious? You mean all three of us? Rudius brought his mouth to Fitz's ear and murmured his reply. Yeah, that's right. We can have Roxy teach both of us at once. Roxy's going to teach us? Well, of course she is. She's the expert after all. Fitz glanced over at Roxy, who turned her face to the side sulkily. I still didn't say I'm willing yet. You know. Come on, don't say that. Sylphie wants to learn too. Isn't that right, Sylphie? I don't know. It sounds kind of embarrassing. Still wrapped up in Rudius's arms, Fitz squirmed around uncertainly. The sunglasses she'd once worn as a disguise hid her eyes from view, but it was obvious they were shining with emotion. But I guess I'll do it. For you, Rudy. Oh, Sylphie! Overcome with affection, Rudius buried his face in Fitz's hair. Its pleasant scent and softness left him even more excited, and his hug grew more intense by the second. Fitz, for her part, was entranced by this powerful embrace, and soon stopped resisting it entirely. Roxy looked on with envy in her eyes. This was exactly what Rudius needed. It was time to press the attack once more. Why don't you want to teach me, Roxy? Don't you like me anymore? This time he took a deeply wounded tone. I'm smiling too much to even try that, so... It was enough to make Roxy flinch. It was enough to make Roxy flinch. Of course I still like you, Rudy. I love you very much. Then why are you being like this? Well, if I teach you this, I won't have anything left that I'm better at than you. What? Don't be ridiculous, Roxy. You're on a higher plane of existence than me. Roxy sighed at this. Okay, look. I've been meaning to say this for a while, but I think your opinion of me is a little overblown. I'm a petty person. Really, the sort of woman who gets upset about her students surpassing her. That's not a problem, I assure you. You're perfect just the way you are, pettiness and all. Anyway, I spent months of my life learning this, you know? You and Sylphie are more talented than I ever was, so you'll probably master it much more quickly. At this point, Fitz finally realized that she'd misunderstood the situation, and her dreamy smile gave way to a confused expression. Sorry, Rudy. What exactly are we talking about here? Oh, right. I was asking Roxy to teach me a king tier water spell. Fuck, that's funny. Oh man, I was doing my best not to giggle through that whole fucking thing because that's fucking funny.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay. Oh.
It's probably gonna be animated pretty well
The
too.
misunderstandings
Oh
of marriage.
yes. I
Yep.
can't wait to see this animated because the faces they're gonna have Sylphie making
end everything, especially as she finally starts coming to the realization. Oh, shit.
That's gonna be some
Exactly.
weird
Could
shit.
ever go wrong?
I know. All I could
What
think
could
about
ever
was
go
that.
wrong?
Just picturing her face, just uh.
I don't know what you're
Yeah.
talking about. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Jeez.
So fucking funny.
Awesome.
Okay. Ooh, gotta calm down. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you familiar with the concept of a romantic bike ride? Allow me to elaborate. I'm referring specifically to a youthful couple sharing a single bicycle. Most typically, a boy will be pedaling up in front, with a girl seated behind him. She sits sideways on the luggage rack, perhaps with her arms wrapped tightly around his waist, perhaps keeping a slight distance instead. The boy might be doing the steering and pedaling, but in many cases, the bike itself belongs to the girl. The natural habitat for an event of this kind is a riverbank in the early evening. The warm red glow of the setting sun conveniently disguises any mild blushing that might be going on. At the moment, I found myself in a very comparable situation. The sun was still high in the sky, but the nape of Sylphie's neck was sitting right in front of me. By moving my nose forward, I could easily fill my nostrils with the sweet scent of her skin. I also had my arms around her waist, with my hands crossed right around her navel. My upper body was pressed closely against hers. I could feel the beating of her heart through my chest. It was truly splendid. Just as a side note, I should mention that I was keeping my lower body a bit separated from hers for reasons that I don't need to be stated. She was my wife and all, but I still needed to treat her with respect. Also, I'd seen several news stories about car crashes caused by a passenger groping their driver. We were on a horse at the moment, which wasn't quite the same thing, but it still wasn't a good idea to distract the person holding the reins. Matsukaze really is a good voice, is a good horse, said a voice from just beyond Sylphie. He's calm and does what he's told, but he's also very strong. I leaned to look over Sylphie's shoulder, and the back of a blue-haired girl came into view. It was Roxy. She was sitting just in front of Sylphie. That poor horse. I hope it's like a Clydesdale or something. Then again, I guess Roxy and Sylphie probably ain't that heavy, and Rudius is probably the heavier of the three, so... Anyways. Yep, you don't see a horse like this every day, that's for sure. The three of us had squeezed onto the back of a single horse. Matsukaze, the most neglected of our household's pets, didn't seem to mind this excessive burden one bit. He was trotting along as if we weren't even there. Didn't Ginger pick her out for you, Rudy? Asked Sylphie. She's got a good eye for horses. Do you know a lot about do you know a lot about horses yourself, Sylphie? Said Roxy. Huh? I wouldn't go that far. But I did get to see some of the best horses in the kingdom of Asura a couple times. Like the one the captain of the Royal Knights rides. Hold on. I see. I'm sure that must be a splendid animal. At this, Matsukaze whinnied as if to object. Oh, I'm sorry, Matsukaze, said Roxy hurriedly. You're quite splendid too, after all. You're the one and only steed of the Grey Rat family. Did certain animals understand human languages in this world? Or maybe Roxy was just a horse whisperer? Probably not. Pets start responding to your voice when you talk to them enough, that's all. Aisha was always chatting at Bit and Dillo, too. In any case, I have to admit... hold on. Okay, hold on. In any case, I have to admit, it's a bit embarrassing riding in front at my age. Every time we met someone coming the opposite direction, Roxy would blush and pull her hat down over her face. I suppose sitting in front of the person holding the reins was comparable to riding in the baby seat in a car. I wouldn't have minded following you two on Dillo or something, you know. Nice try, Roxy, Sylphie said with a smile. I bet you were planning to run off the instant we took our eyes off you. I'm not a child. I wasn't going to run away. Enjoying the sound of my wives chatting, I took some time to gaze at the scenery around us. At the moment, we were on the outskirts of the city. There was a small, beautiful stream running to our right. On our left, there was a large plain with a forest in the distance. The Northern Territories weren't the most fertile part of the world, but at this time of year, there was lots of green. Up until a few minutes ago, we'd been passing fields of wheat and potatoes, but now we were surrounded by empty, undeveloped country. I wasn't entirely sure how many hours we'd been riding now, but we'd clearly come far enough to get some privacy. Watching the water on our right, I caught glimpses of fish as the sunlight reflected off their scales. This was one of several smaller streams that fed into the river which ran past the city of Sharia. It might be nice to come out of the city to fish on a sunny day, even if I didn't travel as far. Not that I'd ever fished before. I told you I was going to teach you, and I intend to do a proper job of it. The reason we'd come all the way out here was simple enough. Roxy had folded. My repeated pleas and badgering had finally worn her down. I'll teach you the only king tier water spell I've mastered, Lightning Storm. Roxy still sounded disappointed about this turn of events, so I reached past Sylphie's side and stroked her shoulders affectionately. In any case, Lightning Storm, huh? Just based on the name, it sounded like a standard electricity-based spell. Now that I thought about it, though lightning wasn't one of the standard magical disciplines in this world, I'd never seen anyone use an electric-type spell before. And on top of that, this was a king-tier spell. I had to assume it was going to be dramatic. Alright. Alright. I think we've come far enough. After a bit more time on the road, Roxy called us to halt and hop down off Matsukaze. She proceeded to tie him to a small tree about as thick as her leg. Hey teacher, do you remember Caravaggio? Oh, yes. That was the name of Paul's horse, wasn't it? That really brings me back. Roxy smiled, looking a bit nostalgic. It had been 12 years since she helped me become a water saint. I'd picked up a bunch of other skills in the meantime, but only now was I finally moving up to king tier. It felt like I'd taken a lot of detours on the road to this moment. But on the topic of the horse, poor Caravaggio had very nearly died back then. Roxy had just managed to save his life, but he could have been killed instantly. It was possible she'd forgotten about that after all this time, so I felt the need to bring it up. Is there any risk of another accident like that, or like the one we had back then? I don't think so, no. But we wouldn't want Matsukaze catching cold in the rain, so you should make an earth fortress to shelter him. Got it. I promptly turned and enclosed our horse in an earthen igloo of sorts. He accepted this with admirable aplomb. Should I be waiting at a distance or anything? Said Sylphie, pulling on her rain jacket. No, that won't be necessary, replied Roxy, doing the same. Even a saint tier spell was enough to leave you drenched, so I'd proposed that we bring these along as a precautionary measure. I pulled mine on as well. Is everyone ready? Yep, whenever you are. Roxy nodded and pointed at a tree far off in the distance. It was an enormous thing. Even from far away, I could tell that its trunk was incredibly thick. I'll be using that tree as my target. I can only use this once today, so watch very carefully. Got it. With another small nod at my reply, Roxy closed her eyes and began breathing deeply. Her hands clutched her staff tightly as she focused intently on the task at hand. This went on for longer than I'd expected. She could fire off a saint tier spell quickly, but apparently this wasn't so easy for her. Although I didn't have an eye of magical power or anything, I felt pretty confident that she was using this time to gather up a huge amount of mana for the spell. After a few long minutes, Roxy's eyes snapped open and she murmured, "All right then, let's begin." With those words, she stabbed her staff down into the ground. With her left hand, she held it steady. With her right, she clutched the magic stone on top of it. And finally, she began to chant, slowly and carefully, as if reviewing every word before she spoke it. O spirits of the magnificent waters, I beseech thee, Prince of Thunder, grant me my wish. Bless me with thy savagery, and reveal to this insignificant servant a glimpse of thy power. Let fear strike the heart of man as thy divine hammer strikes its anvil, and cover the land with water. A few sentences in, I recognized the words and blinked in confusion. Come, O rain, and wash everything away in thy flood of destruction. Black clouds rapidly filled the sky above us. Simultaneously, a harsh and pelting rain began to fall. Wind whipped across the plain, driving the water up and under my coat. My robe was soaked instantly. Lightning flickered up above us, threatening to strike the ground at any moment. It was all very impressive, but I'd seen it before. This was just the Saint tier spell Cumulonimbus. I call upon you, mighty spirit of light, shining lord of the heavens. But when I expected the chant to end, Roxy kept right on going. Do you see the impudent foe towering before us? Do you see your sworn enemy in all his arrogance? I would be the holy blade that strikes him down. Let your radiant power teach him that the Emperor yet reigns supreme. With every word that left her mouth, the sky above us was compressed. The black clouds that had stretched across the horizon collapsed in on themselves, forming a circle that grew smaller and denser by the second crackling electricity arced all around the dark mass. And finally, when the ring of cloud had shrunk to a mere dot in the sky, lightning! A pillar of pure light fell to the earth. It was a bolt of lightning, yes, but it was nothing like any I'd seen before. The sound wave reached us a split second later. The roar was deafening even at this range. Sylphie clapped her hands over her ears and grimaced. I, on the other hand, was too busy staring slackjaw out into the distance. I couldn't find anything to say, not a single word. After a few moments, I managed to swallow. At some point, I'd clutched my hands into fists. They were trembling. Once the roar had swept past us, nothing remained. The massive jet black clouds were gone. The sheets of torrential rain were gone. The blinding pillar of lightning was gone. And that massive tree was gone too. There was simply nothing left. The sky above us was clear and blue. The earth around us was wet. But that was the only hint remaining of what had just transpired. When I strained my eyes, I could just barely make out a black clump of carbonized wood where the tree had once stood. Ugh. Releasing her grip on her staff, Roxy staggered to one side. I hurried to catch her before she could fall. Are you all right? I'm glad I pulled that off. With my mana capacity, I can only use it once, even with my staff. Did you get a good look at the spell, Rudy? Absolutely, teacher. I hadn't been able to tear my eyes away from that for a single second. I remembered every word of the incantation, too. Do you think you're ready to try it? I'll give it a shot. After handing Roxy off to Sylphie, I turned away, held out my own staff, and tightened my grip on its shaft. Aquahardia had been with me since the day I turned 10, supporting me through all the turbulence of my life. I felt confident I could cast this spell without its help, but I wanted to use it anyway. Trying to remember what I'd just seen as precisely as possible, I looked up at the sky and began to chant. O spirits of the magnificent waters, I beseech thee, Prince of Thunder, grant me my wish, bless me with thy savagery, and reveal to this insignificant servant a glimpse of thy power. Let fear strike the heart of Mana as thy divine hammer strikes its anvil, and cover the land with water. Come, O rain, and wash everything away in thy flood of destruction. A huge amount of mana poured from my hands into the staff, then shot up to the heavens. As the storm clouds gathered, I felt the magic raging all around me, ready to be harnessed and unleashed. If I had chanted the word Cumulonimbus next, the spell would have completed itself. I wasn't going to do that, though, and I thought I understood why. If I gave the spell a coherent form, it would probably be impossible to achieve that compression of the clouds. I needed to move on to the next stage without stabilizing the spell. I call upon you, mighty spirit of light, shining lord of the heavens. Do you see the impudent foe towering before us? Do you see your sworn enemy in all his arrogance? I would be thy holy blade that strikes him down. Let your radiant power teach him that the emperor yet reigns supreme. With every phrase I spoke, the magic in the air raged more and more intensely. I had no choice but to pour more mana into the spell to keep it from spinning out of control entirely. It was forcing the clouds to compress, squeezing them together with all my might. This spell demanded power, raw, brute power. That was the only thing that made it possible. I'd never cast anything that demanded such ferocious force before. No, that wasn't entirely true. Something about this was familiar to me. It wasn't so different from what I felt when I was pushing my stone cannon to the very limit of its potential. The moment I realized that, the spell suddenly felt much easier to control. Lightning! When I spoke the final word, I could sense something like an empty hole open up underneath my compressed ball of mana. I pushed everything down through it all at once. Krakoom! Once again, a great pillar of light hit the earth, and its roar swept past us. I hadn't used any particular target, but the spell had struck the ground exactly where I wanted it to. Once again, there was nothing left in its wake. There were no black clouds above us, only clear blue sky. But the ground was a bit more sodden than before, and our coats were dripping with water. The after image of the lightning was still flashing before my eyes. My ears were still ringing from its roar. I'd pulled it off. Sylvie was the first to speak. All she managed, though, was a startled, "Oh, wow." Just like that, I was a king-tier water mage. That was a little frustrating. On our way back home, Sylvie's expression was slightly downcast. After my successful attempt, she'd given the spell a shot as well. Roxy started her off with Cumulonimbus. She failed the first time, but pulled it off on her second try. Unfortunately, she hadn't managed to cast lightning. Her first attempt had failed, and it had also drained her dry. Compressing the mana was the hardest part of the spell by far. I'd probably only succeeded because I'd experienced doing something similar. Still, Sylphie was a quick learner. I had a feeling she'd figure it out if she gave it a couple more tries. "Don't feel bad, Sylphie," said Roxy with a smile. "I still mess it up once every 5 times or so." In a way, I was a little glad Sylphie had failed this time. If both of us had pulled it off on our first try, Roxy might have taken a hit to her pride. This was interesting, though. Based on what I saw today, Sylphie seemed to have a larger mana capacity than Roxy did. And Roxy's wasn't small at all, from what I understood. Well, somebody succeeded on their very first try. You're incredible, Rudy. Yes, that was certainly impressive. I have to admit, I was expecting it to happen, but it was a bit depressing that you pulled it off that easily. I couldn't find anything to say to the two of them. Sure, I'd started using magic around the age of 2, and I put some effort into expanding my mana capacity, but given how much I ended up, with, I'd probably been born with an unnaturally large supply in the first place. I'd put in the effort, but I'd also just gotten lucky. That made it tricky to say much of anything about my abilities as a mage. In any case, I needed to stay focused for now. We weren't home yet, and my wives were exhausted. Once we were safely back, I'd have to give them both shoulder massages. We'd be skipping the nocturnal activities tonight also. We were all worn out. "Oh, look, Rudy," called Sylphie. "Isn't that a pretty sunset?" I looked over to the west, where the sun was starting to sink below the horizon. The sky all around it was a brilliant shade of crimson. Nature was just as beautiful here as it was back in my old world. That was one thing that hadn't changed. Yeah, it's gorgeous. Was I supposed to tack on, but not as gorgeous as you, there? With a small sigh, Sylphie leaned against me slightly. She looked just about ready to doze off on the spot. We would probably be making it home before it got dark out, but I'd have to stay alert until we reached the city limits. These two couldn't use magic right now, so if any monsters popped out, I needed to deal with them. "You know something? I find myself wondering if this is all a dream," murmured Roxy as she gazed at the sunset. Sylphie tilted her head quizzically. "A dream?" "That's right. Maybe I'm still trapped in that labyrinth, and This is a happy little delusion I'm seeing right before I die. I kept my eyes scanning the area around us for threats, half listening to the conversation. Sylvie and Roxy were speaking slowly, fatigue evident on their voices. I'm a lot happier right now than I was 6 months ago. No. I'm a lot happier right now than I was 6 months. No, that is Roxy. Okay, hold on. Hey. I'm a lot happier right now than I was 6 months ago. I got married for one thing, and I was hired as a professor at the university. I suppose I seem like something of an interloper to you, Sylvie, but I'm happy I'm here riding this horse with both of you. I'd felt Sylvie flinch a little when Roxy spoke the word interloper. Now she shook her head in denial. You're not an interloper, Roxy, and I'm glad you've been so kind and considerate about all this. I don't think I'd win if you turned it into some sort of competition. Sylvie's voice was so uncertain that I felt the need to interrupt with a hug at this point. She took one hand off the reins to pat my arm. It was her way of saying I know. I mean, I just got lucky, really, she continued after a moment. I got to know Rudy when we were little, and then I ran into him again when he was really desperate for help. I never would have caught his attention otherwise. I think you're being a bit too modest, said Roxy, her voice slightly troubled. Well, I probably wouldn't even be here today if I hadn't met Rudy as a kid. What do you mean? He taught me magic when I was young, you know? It's the only thing that kept me alive. Sylvie began to recount the story of her life after the displacement incident. She'd been unlucky enough to emerge high in the sky above the royal palace in Asura. By quickly casting a spell, she just barely managed to land safely, but at that moment her hair lost its original color, possibly a side effect of spending too much mana in her terror. Princess Ariel had taken a personal liking to her, but it was her rare ability to cast spells silently that had earned her a place in the royal court. And when Ariel was outmaneuvered by her political rivals, the same ability had allowed Sylvie to fight off dozens of assassins as they fled. In the picture she painted, my magic was the only thing that had kept her alive through all of this. Back when I was working as Princess Ariel's guardian mage, this one thought kept popping into my head. If I didn't know how to use magic, I'd probably be a slave right now. As she spoke, I found myself wondering how different my own life would have been if I hadn't met Roxy or Sylvie when I was young. If not for Roxy, I wouldn't have found the courage to leave that house for years. I was confident of that much. If I'd never taken a step outside, never met Sylvie, could I have survived the displacement incident? Could I have made my way across the demon continent? Well, if I'd never met Sylvie, I wouldn't have ended up getting sent to the city of Roa, which meant I wouldn't have met Eris or Ghislaine. Maybe my parents would have shipped me off to school eventually. I would have hit a wall with my magic at some point, so I might have ended up asking them to send me to the Renoa University of Magic anyway. Under different circumstances, Paul might have approved instead of telling me to wait until I was 12. But of course, I wouldn't have found Sylvie waiting for me in Renoa. She wouldn't have followed me up here either. Maybe I would have ended up in the same class as Linnea and Prasanna and fallen in love with one of them. When we graduated, I'd head back to the Great Forest and live amongst the beast folk. Well, no. The displacement incident would have taken place eventually, so I probably would have rushed back home to Asura. In any case, my life would have looked completely different. Still, I couldn't help feeling like I would have run into Sylvie somewhere, and fallen in love with her, of course. Yes, surely this was predestined by the laws of causality. Or just fate, if you prefer. Whatever. My life changed completely the day I met Rudy, Sylvie concluded, with her story at an end. I mean, I did put in a lot of effort too, but I think I was lucky more than anything else. So when I see someone like you, who changed Rudy's life for the better, and I know you both love each other, well, I don't really want him to lose that just because I'm around, I guess. I probably don't have the right to object when I just got here first. Sorry, I don't know how to put this. That's all right, said Roxy quietly. I understand what you're trying to say, and I'm very happy you have such a high opinion of me. I couldn't see Roxy's face, since she was sitting up in front. But I could see that her shoulders were trembling slightly. I stretched my arms out and pulled both her and Sylphie into a hug. Rudy! Back in my old world, choosing Roxy would have meant losing Sylphie, and it could have worked out that way here, if not for Sylphie's decision to forgive me. The only lucky person here was me. Given my less than ideal track record as a husband, promising that I'd cherish them forever would probably ring hollow. I'd just have to speak with my actions instead. Once we made it home that evening, I took some time to go over what I'd learned from the day's lessons on King Tier magic. Lightning was a tricky spell, but the basic concept was simple. You spread a huge amount of mana all across the sky, then concentrated in one location and dropped it down on your target. Physically speaking, you created the storm clouds, then fired off a bolt of lightning. Simple as that. In retrospect, Cumulonimbus and lightning were essentially two parts of a single spell. Its destructive power was the greatest of any spell I'd seen so far. That was only natural, though. I didn't know of any magic that demanded more raw mana than Cumulonimbus, and lightning concentrated all of that energy into a single spot. Up until now, my fully charged stone cannon had been the most lethal spell in my arsenal, but this one might have surpassed it. With this many gigawatts at my fingertips, I could launch myself into the future, if I wanted to. But seriously though, although the name of this spell was lightning, the real secret behind its power lay in the mana compression step. I was curious if any king tier spells in other disciplines might be applications of the same basic technique. In any case, now that I'd gotten through casting the spell once, I'd be able to use it silently in the future. The next time I used it, I was fairly sure I could speed up both the cloud formation and compression phases, and drop the bolt of lightning much more quickly than before. But although I was planning to practice with it, I wasn't sure I'd get many chances to put this spell to practical use. After all, if I was up against a single target, my stone cannon was usually more than enough. Lightning was kind of an overkill spell on the whole. It would be more useful if I could find a way to reduce its power. With this thought in mind, I started playing around a little on a much smaller scale, and after several failed experiments, I stumbled across a way to generate a strong electric current. The method involved silently casting a tiny cumulonimbus spell, compressing it, and firing off a lightning spell in the direction of my target. This resulted in a small crackling bolt of electricity that could be directed with considerable accuracy. Its voltage seemed to be fairly low, too, so the damage it did wasn't too excessive. I wasn't sure exactly how this worked, but it seemed like it might come in handy. It probably wasn't suitable for extremely close-range combat. You'd end up shocking yourself along with your target. On the bright side, it wasn't going to do any lasting damage. At worst, you'd be incapacitated for a time. But there were lots of other attack magic spells that didn't run the risk of hurting their own caster. Still, it felt worth trying to refine this. I could use a spell designed to stun someone instead of killing them. Lightning branches through the air to reach its target, so it would be impossible to avoid, and the shock might even be effective at disabling someone protected by a battle aura. I didn't have anyone to test that on at the moment, but if Bodyguardy came back, I could ask him to be my guinea pig. If nothing else, it might be a nice surprise to pull out of my sleeve against a more powerful opponent. Incidentally, although this spell was just a tiny form of lightning, I decided to call it electric, so I could distinguish between the two. It's electric. What a productive day this had been. Legends of the University number 6. The boss has an electric personality. Oh. Chapter 7. The Wedding Ceremony. I'd been planning to sleep alone that night. The night I became a Water King. This was mainly because Roxy and Sylphie were both tuckered out, so it didn't feel like the time for romance. I was pleasantly tired myself, but I knew I wouldn't be able to keep my hands to myself if I got into bed with either of them, so I decided we would all sleep in different rooms. When I mentioned this to Aisha, though, she insisted on sleeping with me herself. This sort of thing had happened plenty of times before. I never actively invited her, but when she asked to sleep with me, I never turned her down. There was no real reason to refuse, so I gave her my permission. Of course, this was going to be the tricky platonic kind of sleeping. Or the strictly platonic kind of sleeping. As Aisha celebrated, though, I noticed that Norn was looking on with something that looked like envy in her eyes. Norn was already supposed to be staying over here tonight,
Knowing her, though, there probably wasn't much point in suggesting that she join us. That was my assumption, at least. But when I threw the offer out there, just to be polite, Norn actually took me up on it. I ended up sandwiched between my sisters that night. Aisha was lying on my right, and Norn took my left. Before long, they were snoring away with their heads resting on my arms. Aisha was one thing, but I was a bit perplexed that Norn had gone along with this. Her peaceful little face wasn't giving me any clues either. Maybe it was her way of telling me that she'd accepted me as a kind of substitute father. I trust you enough to sleep cuddled against you, or something like that, maybe. I was pinned in place with my arms outstretched, but I felt profoundly happy in that moment. It was almost as if I'd found a part of me that had been missing. Just as a bird needs 2 wings, perhaps a man needs 2 sisters on his arms. No. This thought gave rise to an idea that sent a jolt running down my spine. Man, I want to have a threesome with Sylphie and Roxy. Fair. It was the voice of the devil, no doubt, whispering these words into my ear. Some evil snake, its tongue flickering around suggestively, was trying its best to lead me astray. I couldn't let myself continue thinking about this. In theory, it was something I'd been interested in for many years, but in practice, I had no idea how I'd even begin the conversation. They both loved me, but that didn't mean they'd be comfortable with a request like that. Well, actually, we at least know Sylphie's okay with it. I could take no for an answer, of course, but what if even asking them destroyed our relationship? I didn't think that was likely, but I couldn't help worrying about it. It wasn't like I was dissatisfied with our current arrangement. I was spending alternate nights with 2 very beautiful women, after all. What's more, I was in love with both of them. One had already given me a child. What did I have to complain about? Nothing, that's what. That said, I did want to try sleeping with both of them at once. Part of it was that they both approached it so differently. Sylphie was a bit on the submissive side. As a general rule, she did anything I asked her to in bed. When I suggested we try something new, she'd often lower her eyes anxiously, but she never objected. That's not to say she was a dead fish, though. Once we actually got started, she always enjoyed herself. Within a couple of minutes, she'd be gasping for air and clinging to me desperately. It was obvious how much she wanted to please me, and it was adorable. Roxy, on the other hand, was something of a technician. She was constantly making use of the things she'd learned from Elise, trying to increase her skills. When I asked her to try something, she'd give me some thought to the best way to do it. When I offered to do something myself, she'd make all sorts of suggestions. Given the difference in our sizes, we had some physical challenges to overcome, but she was creative and hardworking enough to find ways around them, and that was just as adorable in its own way. Sylphie was the indulgent type, and Roxy was an experimenter. They were both wonderful. I didn't prefer one over the other. It was possible I'd eventually start enjoying my time with one of them more, but even then, I wasn't planning to neglect the other. My intention was to treat them as equally as I possibly could. Right. I loved both of them equally. So was it really that wrong to think about sleeping with both of them at once? Surely the answer was no. Any red-blooded man has some interest in such things. It's simply in our nature. However, that didn't mean I was going to voice these thoughts. Sometimes it's wisest to keep your more extreme desires to yourself if you want to maintain healthy relationships. This was the very reason I'd never let myself bring this up before. As of this moment, at least, I was confident that wasn't going to change. The next morning, I headed over to Cliff's laboratory. Cliff's research was focused on the development of magical implements, specifically ones capable of encountering curses. He'd insisted that I was welcome to drop in on him at any time, but whenever I dropped by, I made sure to listen carefully at the door. Depending on the noises I heard from inside, I sometimes had to turn around and leave. Today, there didn't seem to be anything problematic going on in there, so I knocked on the door. "Come in, the door's open," called a voice from within. I stepped into the laboratory to find Elise, sitting by the far window. She was resting her cheek on her hand and gazing out at the street, her long curly hair glimmering in the sun. The woman sure was picturesque when she wasn't talking, but I knew her too well to be impressed. She was probably thinking unspeakably dirty thoughts. "Are you the only one home, Elise?" "That's right. That's right." Cliff was very busy these days and hadn't been making much progress on his research. We'd been talking for months about finding the time to improve his existing prototypes using the stones of absorption,
but it still hadn't happened yet. Cliff's off working on the wedding preparations again. That right there was one of the major reasons. Cliff and Elise were getting married soon. I keep offering to help out, she continued, but he's determined to do it all himself. Try not to hold it against him. Men can be prideful about these things, you know? Before we left for the Beggarate continent, Cliff had promised Elise he'd marry her when we returned. When we made it back, though, he hadn't even begun to prepare yet. That wasn't his fault by any means. We told him we might be gone for 2 years, but we ended up making it back in 6 months. It would have been odd to find him ready and waiting. However, Cliff was the kind of guy who took his promises seriously. With remarkable focus and stubbornness, he'd gotten everything arranged over the last few months. First and foremost, he found them a place to live, bought the furniture, and planned out everything they needed to move in. For the most part, he handled all of this on his own, although I'd helped out a bit with the real estate hunt. Unlike me, he wasn't interested in buying a house. He'd eventually settled on renting an apartment in the student district. If it ever got too cramped for them, he figured they could just move to a bigger place. I was a bit surprised by that attitude, considering Cliff was something of a show-off by nature. But on the other hand, he wasn't swimming in cash at the moment, so it was perfectly reasonable. He couldn't have purchased a pricey home, not without financial help from Elise at least. I knew she was pretty well off. Oh, and on that note, congratulations, Elise. They were in the final stages now. The wedding was scheduled for next month. Something about Elise wearing a pure white dress felt slightly out of character, but as long as the two of them were happy, that was all that really mattered. You mind if I wait around until Cliff comes back? Not at all. Elise was keeping up her side of the conversation, but she hadn't even looked in my direction yet. And now, still gazing out the window, she let out a long, deep sigh. It was the kind of sigh that came with its own subtitles. I'm so very troubled. Won't anyone ask me what's going on? Or what's wrong with it? Are you having second thoughts about the marriage or anything? I ventured. Oh, of course not. Cliff's so sweet and devoted that I almost feel like I don't deserve him. I couldn't be happier that we're getting married. Fair enough. I was only a spectator here, but as fair as I could tell, Cliff was nothing but loving and loyal to Elise. That's not to say that he was a perfect person. He had plenty of flaws, but he was still a young man, not even 20 years old yet. In fact, when you took his potential for future growth into consideration, the guy was a real catch. So why do you keep sighing then? Isn't it obvious? I see. That meant it was a sex thing, presumably. Cliff's been so busy that he only sleeps with me twice a week. Yeah, I figured as much. That's too bad. But what can you do? He's doing it all for you, Elise. Yes, I understand all that, believe me. And once you finally move into your love nest, you probably won't emerge for a solid week, right? I was speaking from experience. The moment we got back from the Beggarate continent, Elise and Cliff had shut themselves up in here for days. It was enough to make you wonder if all they really cared about was the sex. Not that I had any right to say so, given my own healthy libido. I can't tell. Or wait. Does he literally just say sigh? Okay. Sigh. I can't help being jealous of you, Rudius. Why? Sometimes I go without for a couple days myself. Yes, but you get to fool around with Sylphie and Roxy at once, don't you? I'm satisfied with Cliff, of course, but I'm sure you three have a lot of fun together. Wait, what? No, we don't have threesomes or anything. What? Really? That's a pity. It's quite a good time, I assure you. Why don't you give it a shot? Oh no, the devil's tempting me again. Don't listen to Rudius. Begone, Mata! Amen! So weird thinking of Rudius saying that.
Gone, Grandma!
Oh lord.
Begone, thought.
Whoa. Hey, Optimus. How's it going?
You just pull out the shotgun.
All I
Can't
can
expect
think
God
about
to
now
do
is
all
the
the
meme.
work.
like all women are queens. If she breathes, she's a thought.
Dude, there was so that was like 5,000% voice acting.
Oh yeah.
Absolute cinema.
That was so. If she breathes, she's a thought.
Oh, you should.
I have
Have you
neighbors,
guys
I
seen the
don't
like the
wanna
Life
just
Arrow
actually shout it.
Silver campaign?
Oh,
No.
God, I can't wait for this.
Oh, that like that
Okay.
man who like does that line, like does that same line but from his soul.
The original line was from his
He
soul.
does that, but from his soul.
If she breathes, there's a. I can't do it without actually like
She
either picking the mic
breathes,
and just be
she's
like, yeah, we're not gonna
a
send that audio over.
Yeah. He
Hold
holds
on,
it.
I'll get that clip for you guys to check later.
And he runs
I'll
at
ship it.
somebody, so that's pretty talented.
And then there's like the Sonic Frontiers like No Compromise song.
Yay, it's 30 degrees outside. Yay.
Yippee.
Yippee.
Yep, 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 yep. Yorp, yorp, yorp.
Let's see. 1, 2, 3,
Okay.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
I should be able to
10,
finish it soon.
12, 13, 14. Okay, when you get to chapter 8, stop.
That's the plan. I'm keeping an eye on the time.
Go.
Okay. All right. Scandalous. Disgraceful. I'm going to get you banned from the library, Elise. I don't think Sylphie or Roxy would mind, you know. Easy for you to say, woman. What if I destroy my marriage? Or marriages? I suppose Roxy can be a bit uptight sometimes. She might not react too well if you drop the idea on her all of a sudden. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Sylphie tended to go along with anything I proposed. It was hard to know how she felt about things, and sometimes I wondered if she was sacrificing her own desires to please me. But if I told her I wanted to try this, I was confident she'd agree. Things were different with Roxy, though. Despite her no-nonsense personality, she had a surprisingly innocent side to her. For all I knew, the moment I proposed a threesome, she'd start packing her bags to go home to her parents. Now that you mention it, though, Elise murmured, I could speak to them about this. You know, lay the groundwork for you. My God, of course! It's brilliant! Roxy might not react well if I brought this up out of nowhere, but she was actively learning new bedroom techniques from Elise. Elise could easily start dropping a few lessons about threesomes into their curriculum. And Sylphie trusted her advice completely, too. This was perfect. Almost too perfect. We'd be wrestling around in bed together in no time, and I wouldn't even have to feel awkward about it. Elise, you're a goddess. Was that a halo I saw above her head? Overcome with emotion, I bowed deeply before my savior. Elise replied in an amused tone of voice. Well, well, such flattery. I'm not so sure I actually want to help you, though. It's not like I'm getting anything out of the bargain. She'd brought up the idea, and now she's refusing to help me? What a terrible woman! But I couldn't fight back now. She had me in the palm of her hand, and she knew it. I had all the willpower of a horse with a carrot dangling in front of its nose. Is there anything at all I can do for you, Elise? As I looked up anxiously at her face, Elise grinned wickedly. The woman really was a villain. Even my smiles don't look this evil. Probably. Well, I seem to remember hearing something about a rare aphrodisiac from the King of Asura. Right, I've still got that. Never got around to using it. Would you mind giving that to me as a present? She had to be talking about the little bottle of potion I'd received from Luke. To be honest, I'd never felt the need to rely on that stuff. I had more stamina than either of my wives, so I was afraid I might end up harming them if I took it. The idea of making them take it felt a little wrong, too. I'd never figured out a good way to use it. How do you want to use it? To spice up my wedding night. Is that even going to be necessary? It's a special occasion, dear. I'd rather like to have Cliff on me like a wild beast all night long. Sometimes it amazed me how freely Elise embraced her own horniness. I mean, It wasn't like Cliff was constantly walking around in a state of excitement. Delicate question, delicate question, Elenalise. But do you ever get worried that you'll drive Cliff away with your, appetite? Not at all. We wouldn't have ended up together in the first place if he couldn't handle it. Ever considered trying to tone things down for his sake? I could try to restrain myself, but I'd explode eventually. I'd rather be consistently honest about my feelings. That was Elenalise for you, all right. Now that I thought about it, though, Cliff didn't seem to be forcing himself to keep up with her either. He did his best to please her, but I felt like he knew his own limits. They both loved each other intensely in their own distinct ways. That seemed like a fun dynamic for a relationship. I kind of envied them. Well, all right then, you've got a deal. I'll bring it over next time I stop by. You're too kind, dear. Oh, I can't wait to see what Cliff's like when he can't control his passion anymore. Elenalise began to drool, her eyes glossy with passion. I was starting to feel a bit worried for my friend, but hopefully the two of them could emerge from this even closer than before. A month later, I found myself in the only Millis church in the city of Sharia. It was a majestic, solemn place, not unlike a Christian cathedral. Rows of simple benches filled most of the space. Up in front, the holy symbol of the Millis faith stood in a pool of sunlight pouring through a huge glass window. And in front of that symbol, a priest was offering a litany of praise to God. Saint Millis will always guide you and watch over you. A man and a woman stood facing the priest, wearing pure white clothing. Behind them, 20-odd spectators looked on quietly. Should anyone seek to divide you, his holy shield will protect you. Should anyone seek to harm you, his holy sword will judge them. And should your love prove a lie, his fiery sorrow will pierce the heavens. I was one of those spectators, standing in the very first row. In fact, all dressed up, I was one of those standing in the very first row, in fact, all dressed up in Asuran-style finery. Sylphie stood on my right and Roxy on my left. Both of them wore modest, formal dresses. We hadn't owned any of these clothes beforehand, so we'd gone out and bought them for the occasion. I wasn't sure when we'd need to wear them again, but it couldn't hurt to have them around. Ariel and Luke stood on Sylphie's other side, wearing what looked to be some very expensive clothes of their own. Behind us was another row of VIPs, including Zenoba, Linnea, and Persana. And behind them, there was a row of miscellaneous guests. Ginger, Julie, and two girls who were apparently Ariel's attendants, among others. I couldn't see them from where I stood, but Norn and Aisha were somewhere back there too. Oh, now my face suddenly decides to be... Ugh, okay. They were both wearing nice dresses today, but I'd opted to rent those. They were both growling girls, so it felt premature to buy anything that hadn't been too they hadn't been too pleased about the... They were both growling girls, so it felt premature to buy anything. They hadn't been too pleased about that, of course. There were some guests I didn't recognize as well, but unsurprisingly, none of Hoshi hadn't shown. In Millis Church weddings, the rows of guests were apparently divided by rank. The very front row was reserved for the highest-ranking spectators, as well as the closest family members of the bride and groom. Princess Ariel's presence in the very front was only natural, in other words, and Sylphie was Elenalise's only relative in the room, which earned her a spot. On the other hand, I was only up here because I was Sylphie's husband. That made me feel slightly out of place. Roxy had it worse than me, though. She was up here as my second wife, and the Millis Church didn't think too highly of bigamy. Bigamy? Whatever. I think she found the situation a little awkward, since she'd been standing stiffly in place since the ceremony began. Luke had said there was no need to be self-conscious, since many Asuran nobles took multiple wives despite the doctrines of their church. Oh, how hypocritical. I didn't think Roxy had anything to feel guilty about either, for the record. As the ceremony moved steadily along, one exchange caught my attention. Cliff Grimoire, do you swear to love Elenalise Dragonroad, and only her so long as you both do live? Who left? Hello? Did someone leave?
Lost one.
Yeah, but it looks like everyone's still here, so.
Yep.
Oh, Shim. Oh, Shim.
Shem left. That's what.
Oh.
Yeah.
Hope he's okay.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh.
Anyways,
I was gonna say
where
it
was
didn't sound like you were at the end yet.
No, I'm not. But like Shim had popped out, and because I didn't have the screen with everyone up here, I had to make sure it wasn't you.
Oh no, it was good.
Oh,
Welcome
there he is.
back.
There he
Yeah,
is. He's back now.
Here. My laptop did, so I think it was out of battery.
Oh, gotcha.
Ah, okay. Anyways,
False alarm, not emergency.
Cliff Grimoire, do you swear to love Elenelise Dragon Road and only her so long as you both do live? I swear to love her until my death. Apparently, the Millis Church had marriage vows too, and Cliff's choice of words struck me as really heavy. Knowing him, he'd keep his word on this quite literally. Elenelise would be the only woman he touched for the rest of his life. I admired that kind of faithfulness, although I apparently wasn't capable of it myself. Elenelise Dragon Road, do you swear to love Cliff Grimoire, and only him so long as you both do live? I swear to love him all my life. I wasn't sure what to think about Elenelise's vow, though. I knew she'd try to keep her word, but she had her curse to contend with, and there was also the matter of her lifespan. Cliff was probably going to die before her, and I felt like she'd eventually go looking for someone new to love, and no one could blame her for it, surely. Oh, shit. Still, it was kind of bizarre to see her getting married, considering the whole reason she'd enrolled at the university was to sleep around with a bunch of vigorous young men. Life's just full of surprises, isn't it? In that case, the groom may place the necklace of Millis on his bride. Cliff carefully accepted a large, heavily ornamented necklace from the priest. It was a standard ceremonial prop, supposedly made in the image of a necklace St. Millis himself had once worn. Every church had their own copy. Bend over a little, Lise, Cliff whispered under his breath. Ah, right, sorry. Elenelise lowered her head slightly, and Cliff got up on tiptoe to place the necklace around her neck. It wasn't the most graceful moment, poor guy. Most graceful moment. Poor guy didn't seem to be getting any taller. And now, the bride may give her groom the promissory kiss, said the priest. Of course. Slowly bending over, Elenelise kissed Cliff on his forehead rather than his lips. Cute. This part of the ceremony was based on a story from the life of St. Millis. On the day of his departure for the battlefield, Millis had bestowed his necklace on his most beloved in return. In return, she kissed him on the forehead, praying as she did so for his safe return. Later, when Millis was in grave danger, his most beloved held up her necklace to the heavens, moved by its beauty and the depths of her love. God then interceded to save Millis. The story was said to be based on real historical events, but it was hard to say how much of it was literally true. God in heavens, hear my plea. God in heaven, hear my plea. Grant these two the gift of everlasting love and happiness. As he spoke these words, the priest's wooden staff let out a brilliant burst of light that illuminated the entire church. The newlyweds were silhouetted against the radiance. With their pure white clothing, it almost looked as if they were melting into it. It was a lovely, dreamlike moment that seemed to last much longer than it did. Even after the light faded away, Elenelise and Cliff stayed as they were, smiling into each other's faces. They looked truly happy, and it was obvious they were going to stay that way. I almost felt guilty for thinking, so that staff's a magic implement, right? Instead of cooing at the spectacle. Maybe I was getting a little too pragmatic. With the ceremony at an end, the guests filed out of the church while the newlyweds looked on. It was a fairly short event, all things considered. Its purpose was solely to prove their mutual love to God, with us serving as witnesses. There wasn't a reception afterward or anything. Members of the nobility would probably take the opportunity for an after party, but unfortunately, Cliff was just a student. Still, if Bodygotti had been here, I had a feeling he would have loudly demanded that we throw a feast, and I was kind of in the mood to celebrate myself for once. It was a happy occasion, after all. That was amazing. The bride looked so beautiful. Aisha and Norn were in high spirits as well. They'd been chattering excitedly about the ceremony ever since we left the church. You'd never have guessed that there was any tension between them. Come to think of it, though, I hadn't seen them fighting lately. If anything, they were getting along nicely. Millis weddings are so romantic, aren't they? Yeah, I want to wear a dress like that. As my two sisters chirped away, I glanced over at them furtively. I could see Norn falling in love with someone and putting on her own pure white dress someday. It wasn't the most pleasant of thoughts. I'd have to give the lucky man a punch to the face as his wedding present. Aisha, though, I wasn't so sure about her. It was difficult to imagine her running off to get married. Maybe she'd spend her whole life as the family maid. I guess girls do dream about... I guess girls do dream about that sort of ceremony, huh? I said, turning to Sylphie. Well, sure. I'm not complaining, though. She answered with a smile. Ours was nice in its own way. I liked how intimate it was. Of course, if she wanted her own proper wedding ceremony, we could manage something similar. We weren't members of the Millis Church, though, so it would be more of an imitation than anything else. Cliff would probably agree to officiate if I got down on my knees and begged him. I wouldn't hesitate to grovel for Sylphie's sake either. A good man puts his wife before his dignity. Someone had tugged silently at my sleeve. I turned to find Roxy looking up at me. She'd put on some makeup for the occasion, which only enhanced her beauty. The blush on her cheeks looked to be purely natural, though. Do you want to have a wedding ceremony of your own, Roxy? The two of us had never gotten around to formally celebrating our marriage. The timing had a lot to do with it. We'd just delivered the news of Paul's death, after all. But in addition to that, the Meagard had no tradition of matrimonial ceremonies. Roxy had told me up front that it wouldn't be necessary. Still, it wouldn't have surprised me if she'd changed her mind after today. No, that won't be necessary, but, try to read between the lines, will you? With that, Roxy closed her eyes and puckered up. I wasn't entirely sure what had prompted this, but I wasn't about to pass up on such a delightful invitation. Taking Roxy by the shoulders, I pulled her close and kissed her on the forehead. What? Sorry about that. Your forehead's particularly adorable today. Is it? Roxy seemed a bit confused at first, probably because of where I'd planted my kiss, but once I complimented her, a big goofy smile spread across her face. The woman was truly easy to manipulate, but that was just another part of what made her charming. Okay, I think I've made up my mind. It has to be Roxy tonight. Oh, Rudy, give me one too. Clinging to my right arm, Sylphie pushed her head toward me expectantly. Naturally, I wasn't about to disappoint her. Why would I hesitate to plant a kiss on a beautiful woman's forehead? Despite the fact that she'd initiated the kiss, Sylphie pressed a hand to her forehead and giggled bashfully. Does she have to be so cute all the time? God, now I want to sleep with her tonight. But also Roxy. What about both of them at once? I wasn't sure if Elise had finished laying the groundwork for me yet. It had been a while since I asked her, though. And I'd given her the aphrodisiac some time ago. Maybe it was safe to give this a shot. Rudius, could you try to control yourself? Said Norn, interrupting my learning session. We're in public. The look on her face clearly conveyed the unspoken part of her message. I just saw a very nice wedding, but your degeneracy is kind of killing the mood. I understood how she felt. It's not much fun watching your brother seducing a woman, let alone two of them at once. Oh, is somebody a little jealous? What the... Quit it! By ways of an apology, I gave Norn a big hug and planted a kiss on her forehead. Blushing, she pulled herself away and started rubbing furiously at the spot where my lips had touched her. What a splendid sight. Aisha took all of this in with an extremely envious look on her face. It was obvious she wanted to be included, but feared that I might turn her down. Not that she had any reason to be worried, of course. Aisha. With my best attempt at a warm, loving smile, I turned to her and spread my arms wide. Rudius,
Her face shining with joy, Aisha leapt toward me. After receiving her forehead kiss, she snuggled against me like a happy cat. Come suffer in my embrace. Still, I couldn't say I approved of her twining her legs around mine like this in public. She was wearing a dress and all, so she was probably exposing her underwear. Aisha, cut it out with your legs. You've got a dress on, remember? I'm assuming you don't want to flash everyone on the street. Okay, got it. Hopping away from me with a satisfied grin, Aisha got right back to trotting down the street. What was I going to do with her? True, she was only 11 years old, which made her a child, but sadly, there are some gentlemen out there who regarded anyone over the age of 10 as fair game. I needed her to be more careful. As I set off after my sister, a stray thought popped into my head. In a letter he wrote some time ago, Paul had suggested that we celebrated once our family was reunited. I'd been meaning to do something along those lines, but somehow 6 months had slipped past without it happening. We hadn't held a party for Aisha. We hadn't held a party for Aisha and Norn on their fifth or 10th birthdays either. I felt guilty about that, especially since I'd been treated to a big bash at their age. It's always nice to have someone celebrate for you, right? Yeah, okay. Let's have us a party. Legends of the University 7. The boss is a big shot. And done.
Big shot.
We did it.
Yeah.
Yippee. I always forget with this story. It's like it seems very normal and then just goes full horny out of nowhere.
Yeah, I mean,
I was gonna say
That's
Yeah.
literally just
Damn it,
Mushoku
Lita Lee, so it
Tensei.
doesn't roll off the tongue
Yeah.
the same
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. I'm like Rudy. You were the
Very.
weirdest.
It's not the
horniest
same
dude.
as with Rudy.
Yeah, Rudy is the weirdest, horniest dude. Like, just Jesus, man.
Sure is.
Mm-hmm.
Keep it in your pants.
At least it's starting to feel better because he's talking about his wives,
Right?
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
It's
like,
consensual.
okay,
minor-
now you can be horny. Jesus. Stop
So-
creeping on this 8-year-old redhead who was asleep.
Hi, Calvin.
Hello.
And
Hi,
your sister.
Calvin. Jesus Christ, dude. Yeah. Dude has issues. Hi, Calvin.
Hello there.
Oh my goodness. That being said, it's time to go raid. Yeah. I also
It's
did not do my proper 3 minutes before thing, so we had ads throughout this. Hi, buddy.
Oh, whoops.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm not running a 3-minute ad break now. I don't care. Hey, if they were
Yeah.
subscribed, they wouldn't get them.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. Hi, buddy.
Ooh.
Hit me up in a bit. Let's see who is out right now. Oh, we could go say hi to Distortion Devil. We could tell him hello. He's playing Fallout 3 right now. Scuffed internet, banished to the Shadow Realm. The fattest of plants. Dear Lord, what the fuck, Melody? Project Melody, what the hell, Mike?
Banished.
What the hell, Project Melody? Just jeebs, man. Jeebs. Jeebs. Mouse is streaming. You know what? I think we're gonna go say hello. I think we'll go say hello to Connor. Go everybody go tell Distortion Devil, aka Connor, go say hello to Bone Daddy. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go say hi to Bone Daddy. That's who it is. It's Bone Daddy. He's
Salutations.
Yeah.
Bear.
It's Bone Daddy time. All right. That being said, okay.
Bone Daddy.
That being said, though, gang, thank you so much for coming by and hanging out with us for another run of Mushoku Tensei. And yeah, that's pretty much all I got. Anybody got any last minute stuff they want to say?
Why
I mean,
does my
mostly just
face
thanks
have
for
to
coming.
clog when I'm trying to fucking read?
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Your
Me
face
too.
clogs?
Yes,
Yeah,
my
probably
his
sinuses get
nose.
very
Oh,
cloggy.
Oh, no, that I understand. When you're like, why does my face clog? I was like, that sounds like plumber issues. You have plumbing in your face?
Yeah,
Is it
internal
your-
plumbing.
Yeah,
That's
it's called
clogged.
fucking
Is
sinuses.
it your nose or is
no,
it your,
no, you're not
your
wrong.
throat?
All the above.
All right.
Okay.
Well, gang, that's it for us. We'll see you, maybe Wednesday? Moon will. Maybe.
Probably.
Okay.
It's going to end up being probably at a later time than usual because I am scheduled to
Lovely.
work Wednesday, so I can work a football game Saturday. So yeah, I'm gonna be working.
Wrap it up. We got
6
10
days.
seconds.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
But yeah. So probably gonna be doing a little bit
5,
later, but I'll be
4,
watching a
3,
movie. So
2,
yeah.
1. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for
Bye.
coming. Bye.
Bye.
I wasn't joking when I said we had just a little bit of time left.